That bit of a buzz phrase in the role-playing game world these days. That is player agency. Yes. Yes. But before hello Mobius, hello Kabuki Kid. Before we get on to that, we'll start with our usual bit of waffle while I'm saying hello to people as well. And there's Gene. All right, Gene. So, did you have any games this week, Elf? Right?
My normal Monday game was once again canceled. I had 3 of my 5 players out.
It's cancelled more often than it's played, isn't it? That one
seems. If it's not me, it's them.
it's me.
It's good. We play weekly, so it's not a huge loss, But yeah, 2 of my players are a couple, and they had house stuff going on. A couple of their pets were sick, so they were out. And then my youngest, who's sort of the ringer player, they show up when they can. So if I had 3 people, I would run it.
Yeah,
because it's 5e. 3 people and a couple people doubling up on their characters, but I'm not going to get going with just 2 of them there. So
no.
And then I'm out of my Wednesday game permanently. So the one where I'm a player. Yeah. So
it just doesn't go with work for you, does it? So
it's tough. I mean, that's coming right off a 10-hour shift, going out over there playing till midnight, and then having to get up and go back to work the next day.
Isn't that living the dream?
No.
That's what happened to me last.
Maybe when I was 20.
Yeah. That's similar to what happened to me last week when I'd worked on the Sunday and I worked on the Sunday night, and I did an extra shift on the on the Monday all day, and then came home, threw down some quick food, and went straight out to play a game. And yeah, I was sat there trying to hold my eyes awake, going, "Oh!" But yeah. Mage, you've been gaming. Well, you've certainly been making videos. Did you do any gaming?
Oh yeah, this past weekend was the big birthday weekend of gaming where I had my friend coming up from Boston. So yeah, we now this is a 5th ed player. He was introduced at 5th ed and had never played anything else, so he came up for the old school experience. So we started with my Friday night was the OSE game, and he loved it so much he immediately went online and ordered a copy of OSE for himself.
Oh, good.
Wants to introduce his crew to it, and then Saturday and Sunday were AD&D, which he enjoyed. I haven't had the full debrief because he had to leave because he had to drive back to Boston, which is about 8 hours from here. So he left right away at dinner time on Sunday to get back for Monday morning. But yeah, no, it was good, and watching a new player, see the difference and appreciate. My job here is done.
Yes, and my gaming, we played Shadow of the Demon Lords last week, which was gloriously filthy. Myself and General Nut managed to unleash absolute hell on Earth on the poor, innocent, diseased townsfolk who are suffering with a disease that we caused about 6 sessions ago. It's just goblins doing goblin things. And then on Saturday we finished off Reign of Terror, and they succeeded. They managed to thwart the chaos god Azathoth destroying Paris. But it did involve all 3 characters being sent to the guillotine, which is proper Call of Cthulhu, isn't it?
It's going to be kind of hard to explain to the rest of history what happened to Paris.
Yes.
Well, that changes several decades worth of time of events.
Yeah, so in your future Call of Cthulhu games, have like Paris is a wasteland. It's gone. Just don't explain it. Just it's there,
or it's
not
under
there.
Heavy reconstruction.
Yeah.
Not just being sent, also getting to the guillotine. Yes, Slan had to pretty much ensure that his character went to the guillotine. Gingerbeard's character, yeah, it was pretty inevitable after he'd stood up and claimed he supported the monarchy. And then Omanal's character carried out the assassination of the big bad guy in front of most of the revolutionary types who were at the guillotining. So there we go. But yeah, Paris was saved. Private chat. Oh, DK's arrived. Oh yeah, there he is. There we do have a DK. Hello, DK.
Hello.
Didn't know whether you were coming or not.
Sorry, I was eating dinner and talking to someone else, and I forgot about the time. I just came back from the gym. I'm down 4 kg already.
Well done, you.
Yes.
Right. I'm just going to quickly glance through chat before we start. YouTube are always demonetizing all of my streams until I appeal. That's what's happening at the moment. And then it takes between 12 and about 72 hours to get reinstated. Unfortunately, by then, the whole impetus has gone. So it's a dribble of revenue from then on.
They don't reimburse you for the time you lost, like the
wonderful people that they are. Do you know?
No. So yeah, all of my, even the stream last night was, I mean, that was back on by the morning, but most people who watch it would have watched it within
and never watch it again.
Hours, 5 or 6 hours of it happening. For those who weren't able to catch it at the exact moment. So yeah, it's a pain. It's a pain. And yeah, I mean, I know ads are annoying, but every ad you have to sit through is worth 0.3 pence, roughly. Or is it 0.2 pence? It's something. It's something like 500 views gets £1.
Wow.
Is it even that?
So every 2,500, so every 2,500 views, that's a pint.
Roughly. Yeah. It's not massive. I mean, the amount you get, it isn't great, but
yeah.
It's something. Hello, Crafting Gamer. Hello, Muktuk. Yeah, they consider me to be a wrong one. I'd love to be able to. Thing is, if I disable the ads, right, YouTube will still show the ads.
Yep.
It's just that I'll get nothing from them, and YouTube will get all the money instead. That's how it works. You'll still see ads unless it has officially been designated a no advert stream due to the content.
And even then, they'll find another way to get the money out of it anyway.
Exactly.
Because they're hypocrites. So I say let's at least stop the filthy corporates from stealing rightfully earned money from our wonderful YeOldeGeek.
So what I do is I basically leave the ad settings on default for start and end, and it then prompts you. There's a thing called midstream. Or mid video, and if you let YouTube do its default, it often tries to throw in an ad every 5 or 6 minutes, sometimes more than that. So, for example, on this stream playback, I will go through tomorrow. I can't go through it tonight because those things don't appear until it's all been properly processed, and I'll be at work, so it'll be tomorrow night before I get a chance to check it. So sorry if you're watching this tomorrow. After about 9 a.m. I can't do any of the work on it until I get home. But what I then do is I strip out about 80% of the suggested ads so that it actually flows a lot better.
I recently realized how spoiled I was. So we pay for a YouTube Red subscription for my whole family. So I never see ads, except for we had a brief window where my payment didn't go through evidently. And I'm like, oh God, this is horrible. I haven't had this since we started watching YouTube in my house. I'm like, this is what people sit through.
Yes,
I remember a time.
Absolutely ridiculous.
I remember a time when I was a wee little lad, where I didn't have to do this. I remember that. That was a nice time. And then
Yeah,
YouTube decided to be massive douchebags.
To be able to actually have my own stream, I had to subscribe. So, yeah.
So some of you have mentioned that you've got YouTube. If you're a paid YouTube subscriber, then the person who makes the video gets a small amount from each of you.
Oh, that's cool.
It's not a lot, but it is a small amount.
Yeah, I mean, myself, my wife, and my kids are all on the same plan, so we all benefit from that kind of family plan. So
yeah, it's not a lot, but there's a little bit just to compensate for the lack of ads.
Well, and originally we kicked it off so I could have when I open up my channel too, because you have to have it to have a channel.
And Kabuki Kid, I don't hate you for using an ad blocker because I use one as well.
As far as I'm concerned, YouTube makes enough money from all their shady background dealing. So turn on that wondrous ad block.
Yeah. There's some websites that you simply cannot watch or read without an ad blocker. It's
ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Anyway, we're going to go on to topic.
Sexist.
Halakar, that's the thing to do. Go back and put all my videos on in the background while you're doing your housework.
I mean, yeah.
And just leave them playing through and
put them on a loop.
On a
loop. Yeah.
I do fall asleep listening to YouTube sometimes. So
I thought you said you're gonna. I fall asleep listening to you sometimes.
Well, that has happened. Like I fell asleep during your BX tier list today while I took my nap.
Oh, fair enough.
Not that you're boring. It's just it's a very long video.
It is a long video. Yeah.
Man, I've listened to 10-hour videos and I've managed to maintain my concentration.
Are you sick when you do it?
No.
Oh, to be young again.
Yeah. Well, anyways, on to topic.
On to topic. And we're on the topic of player agency. Now, I've got a decision to make here. Do I begin the stream with my definition of player agency, which is the correct definition of player agency? Yeah, ignore all of yours. My definition is the correct definition of player agency. And then we just waffle on for the rest of it. Right, player agency. It's become a buzzword. It's become a fashionable thing to complain about on Twitter. It's a fashionable thing to complain about on Reddit. But my agency.
What? Twitter and Reddit complaining about something? Never.
It's one of the things to throw at DMs. Denying player agency. Don't restrict that. You'll deny player agency. Don't remove that. You'll deny player agency.
I always want to throw up the Inigo Montoya meme every time I see that. Yeah. You keep
on using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
The simple fact is, if somebody throws that in that way, they don't know what player agency means.
Yeah.
Because player agency has nothing whatsoever to do with which options you pick for a game, which classes and roles are available.
But you took my choices away from me, and that's not fair. Right. You're a bad DM.
It's not character creation choices that define player agency. It's in-game choices.
Well, to be fair, if the only amount of interaction with a game that they really do at any meaningful level is character creation, it's kind of understandable why they would think this. I don't agree. Yeah. I think they're wrong. But like someone saying, if all they know the Earth is flat, and they say the Earth is flat, and say, okay, I can't fault you for thinking that because it's all you know. You're still wrong.
But all those globe makers.
I was going to pick up on what you said because you said you think they're wrong. No, they are wrong.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Drop the word "think" from that statement.
I was just being nice.
Now, I will give a perfect example of pure player agency at its most agencyist. And that is our Shadow of the Demon Lord game on Thursday. Saxius, basically, Saxius is the DM. He laid down the world rules. He laid down the game rules. He basically said, these are all the classes and races. You are starting at level 0. Blah, blah, blah. This is the world it's taking place in. This is where you're going to start. Okay. Make some characters. So we did, using the options that were laid out for the world and the rules.
As you do.
We created our characters. We created our characters. We're playing through a set adventure that Saxius has since adapted. But what he did, basically he did, he says, okay, you've got your characters. Where do you live? Well, we're all goblins. We live in a massive dilapidated barn, which is teeming with goblins. That barn then appeared in the world. Who's your boss? Well, it's going to be an old goblin shaman, maybe an old woman, really decrepit. And he said, give her a name then. So we gave her a name. But we are working with the fiction of the world as initially laid out by the DM. And that is what players have to do. He didn't deny our agency in any way by saying, you can't play this race, you can't play that race.
If anything, he gave you a shitload more agency than most DMs would ever dream of doing.
Exactly. And the whole game has been directed by what we've been doing as goblins, because we decided to all be goblins. We've told anyone else who's joined us, you've got to play a goblin. We're all playing goblins. It's not denying them their agency. They've got to fit in with the party. But things have been named according to how we've named them, how we are trying to think as goblins, using our fuzzy logic that got which is really spurious all over the place, but it's what we see as goblin logic. And we have created that setting, that game, that style of game from those options, and that is what player agency is.
Yeah.
Great. End stream.
End stream. End stream.
End stream. We're done. Thanks for all for joining. Anyone want to pimp their stuff?
No, when it comes to agency, I find a lot of the dialogue on it is very lopsided, and I'll try and see if I can keep my thoughts cohesive here. But you're right. A lot of folks seem to just want to throw out any sort of complication of limitation as a lack of agency. And that's not what that is. Guidelines and campaign setting has nothing to do with agency. If you pick up so many people forget, like if you go out and pick up a campaign book or a campaign box set, it's going to tell you what races are in the game. The game itself tells you what races are in the game. Like, and your DM may flex widely on how much they're going to allow, depending on the DM. But if you were to say, just pick up 5e, because, of course, a lot of this dialogue is coming from the newer player base. And with all of its choice, you still came up with something out of the blue. Like, I want to play an intelligent slime, and they're like, because I like Slime Rancher or whatever video game I'm a fan of, the DM might go no, because it's not there. I mean, those limitations exist no matter what you're playing. The default, it's one of the core concessions of the game is that those, but I think but that's, I think, still an incorrect assessment of player agency. I think people think that's player agency, but agency is more about the game play rather than the game setup, and I mean, for the most part.
I mean, to kind of loop it back and say, kind of steel man their position, even though I know they're wrong because they are wrong. It goes back to what I was saying about how the way they view the game since there are certain things that only certain classes and certain races can do, they view that taking those options away from them takes away their potentiality for doing something. Okay, that's not a fault of the dungeon master. That's the fault of the design. And blaming that on the DM for saying, well, I think it's also a knee-jerk, like, well, could I still do something like this without having to resort to these choices? I'm like, yeah, sure. It depends on what you're asking me for, but sure. Because that's kind of the main problem with these players. Because they have no restraint, because they don't typically know what no is, and they're constantly told that they can do what they want, when someone tells them no, they get immediate pushback and never ask, well, why can't I? And they'll say, okay, it's because of this. Well, can I do something similar to this? I'm like, yeah, sure. They don't ever ask, they don't ever ask probing questions. They just knee jerk and assume the worst.
Or they don't engage in collaboration and stuff like that.
Exactly.
WebDM did a great video way back called "The Tyranny of Fun" with capital F-U-N, and it's all about how basically the whole idea of, because agency goes hand in hand with that argument of you're stealing my fun, you're ruining my fun, I've even heard player agency argued in talking about spells like Dispel Magic and Counterspell. Like, that's removing the agency of the player. That's ruining the fun of the game. I'm like, no, that's not what it's doing. It's providing.
And those players,
the same people won't see the other point of view.
Those.
The same people on the other end, when the shoe's on the other foot, that it's like, how dare other people try to make choices? How dare you deny counterspell, right? And it's like, if the DM removes the counterspell so the players can't have it, it's like, well
they'll freak out.
Useful.
Oh, absolutely. They're the same crew who's going to go ahead and tell me that, like, okay, no, I don't want to play with slow healing, or short rests take a full day or whatever. I mean, it's very much a very lopsided argument, but it's.
I mean, it's even,
there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what player agency is supposed to be in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's funny as well. Like, if you actually these, like what you were saying on the counterspell thing, like I've seen multiple times, even on people who love 5e, the kind of videos they talk about, it's like they'll basically say, counterspell. The player's doing this all the time to the DM, and the DM get frustrated. And the one time the DM does this to the players, they get mad.
They cry.
Yeah, it's like, wow, hypocrisy. What's that?
It's just lack of maturity. I mean, a lot of players, we were blanketing players too, and it's obviously not objectively true of everyone, but yeah, I see a lot with people who get into 5th Ed with where the mentality is, yes, give players everything they want. And even the game is designed at the fundamental level that there's maximum freedom. But ironically, the adventures are designed in a very linear way, in a very specific beat-by-beat story-based pattern where there's minimal agency. And nobody complains about that so long as they get their epic moment. And you said it earlier. I think you hit it right on the head, DK, when you said whoever said it was you get such freedom. That's where your freedom is in how you build your character and the story you come up with to precede the game, your backstory. All of that is where you have all the control, because in the game you do not.
I mean, let's even dissect that further. What happens if the DM says dwarves and elves have a natural enmity towards one another, that orcs are inherently evil, and a player wants to play a good orc? And I say, no, because good orcs don't exist. They're just evil.
I mean, ultimately, that comes up to individual DM taste, because, I mean, that's where you have that room to flex. I think any argument for absolutes in an RPG without exception flies completely in the face of the game as written, as published in its content since its inception.
I mean, it's setting dependent. I'm talking about, like, if the setting is
not even setting dependent, because I mean, even in like default Greyhawk, you're running into evil druids and which are supposed to be neutral.
What I mean is, I'm saying,
I think it is setting dependent. I mean.
Well, I mean, everything is setting dependent, but I don't think it's like fun. It's at its core setting dependent. I think it's.
Oh yeah, no.
Oh yes.
So what I mean is, if the DM was like saying a Lord of the Rings style world, there is no instance, at least as long as the Dark Lord is around, there are no good orcs. They do not exist. If the Dark Lord is felled, then maybe you can. But as long as Sauron is around, you won't get a good orc. I'm sorry, they're just evil. And should be killed on sight.
There is evidence within the text to support that is not an absolute, but that also comes down to what the DM wants to allow for. Even in a setting where you have that established, would you rather have somebody adhere dogmatically to an absolutism that has like no exceptions, or are you willing to hear out the player and maybe come up with something good? So not good as an alignment, but something fun to play. So example, all orcs are evil. All right. So the player comes to me and says, I want to play an orc that's not evil. Okay, well, what do you mean by not evil? Well, I mean, he's not like horrible, chaotic evil. Okay, well, is he neutral evil? Is he maybe chaotic neutral? Is he, what is
true neutral? Yeah.
So that is where that's where that agency would come in. It's there's an opening for dialogue. I think for the players, like I was absolutely not going to have Dragonborn in one of my campaigns, and then one of my players came to me. He's like, "I really have this cool idea for a Dragonborn barbarian," and next thing you know, it shaped part of my campaign setting because I listened to him, I heard him out.
I think I would even bet if they made a really convincing argument to me, like if say because Swords of Wizardry, the game I'm going to run soon, has no gnomes as a race, but they're in the setting. There are gnomes. If a player really wanted to play a gnome, I would take the template of the dwarf, say instead of this level you can go up to in fighter, you go up to this level in magic user. You cannot be a cleric unlike dwarves, and that's it. I mean, I would say fine.
In that regard, I mean, not to get to argue too specifically, but a closer approximation to gnomes would be halflings.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that in D&D, standard,
that's my point. You can have that dialogue, and even in the case of like Tolkien, like I said, there is stuff in the text that of the books that has a couple of orcs discussing maybe there's a better life out there. It's the two that are watching over Frodo in the tower after they got him captured. They're like, maybe we should just bugger off here with a bunch of the boys and go find our start up a life of our own somewhere. I'm paraphrasing, but they're having this discussion, which shows that the orcs have some concept that their lot in life sucks, and so. While of
course, they all know this.
It'd be really hard to make a case for, say, a lawful good orc. In Tolkien,
they could be true neutral.
Yeah, chaotic neutral evil.
But I will say. Okay, I will come at this from another angle. Say they did come to me. They really wanted to play. Say even a lawful good orc. Let's say go to the absolute, diametrically opposed extreme on the alignment. Sure, let's just say they really convinced me, which is unlikely, but say they do. I will still say. You are one of, if not the only, lone exception. And everyone in the world is going to treat you with disdain and distrust, or might even outright try to kill you. And I think that actually heightens player agency because it makes that choice matter.
Yes. You're
if you treat them...
I wasn't saying anything against that.
Oh, yeah. So the fact that it... In a way, even if, let's say, we are taking away player choice, constraining of choice makes other choices matter more, I think. I fundamentally think that it does.
Well, I was about to say I mean, you guys are talking about sort of capitulating to player demands in terms of Eli, you're like, okay, I'm open, I'm okay. But what if you are I'm a DM who's like, if I've set the parameters, I generally don't allow exceptions, right? So, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not taking away your agency. Having restrictions and parameters does not remove agency. You have limited choices, but that's immaterial to the game. When you're playing the game, you are making your choices based on what's going on in context in the game.
Yeah,
and let's even consider this. If you don't like you have ultimate say on whether or not you play. I'm not trying to be dismissive here, but it's not like you're being forced to play a game. If you think this choice is so backbreaking and so unfair, then you have every right to just leave the table.
Absolutely, you have agency not to play.
That is why I prefaced even my bit on me being open, that it comes down to the DM, because I'm a more open person when it comes to it. But if that's the game you want to run and you absolutely aren't cool with that, then you're within your rights. You're not a bad person. You're not a bad DM for doing so. And as a player, you have the right to walk away. And also, I mean, honestly, as the DM, as a player, you have some agency too. And you're like, you know what? You players just do not want to play the game I want to run. I'm going to find some new players.
Yep.
100%. Yep. I mean, and I've had to do that.
Ultimately, what goes in the game, I mean, obviously there can be discussion between everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, discussion
that's part of the agency.
Exactly. But ultimately, it's up to the DM what goes in and what doesn't. But as you say, a good DM will talk to the players, because a good DM wants the players to have fun.
Yeah.
But that fun should not be at the cost of of everybody else potentially not having fun.
Yeah, I know a lot of the old stuff in the game wants to use like Gygax's own words against him. The whole, like, it gets commented like he said let the players play anything, as long as you can work it out. Pretty sure he wasn't advocating for let them walk all over your campaign though.
No.
And
if I'm running a Middle Earth game and we're starting in the town of Bree, I'm sorry, you're not going to play a half troll warrior from Mordor. You're just not.
No, I wouldn't even if I were running a MERP game or anything like that, I wouldn't even allow them to play a troll full stop.
I mean, I wouldn't mind running an evil game in that, to be honest.
Oh yeah, if it's evil, then yeah, that's different. But I mean, if you're running like what is like the implied setting, what people expect out of Lord of the Rings, that you play virtuous, lawful good or neutral good characters. No, why would anyone want to troll anywhere near them? They're dangerous.
I personally think it would be interesting to play someone on the other side. To have a party on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, even in games where I've allowed people to play things that weren't in the game, like I ran one campaign, I'm like, tieflings are not a race in this game. I'm like, we're using the old 2nd edition D&D style, the Planescape style tieflings were there, that odd rarity that occurs because
they're cursed, basically.
Well, they're not even cursed. It's just in their blood. But in that respect, I was like, and then it was my kid wanted to play a tiefling, and I'm like, all right, here's the deal. You can be a tiefling, but understand, everybody in the world is going to look at you and just see a demon.
Mm-hmm.
You got the horns, you got the weird skin,
but that's racist.
You smell of sulfur. That's racist. That's what he was saying. But you smell of sulfur. You've got weird colored eyes.
My young, very, very liberal kid did not bat an eye. Just like, all right,
yeah.
Good.
Good. Their thing was like, okay, cool. In fact, they were kind of jazzed by that, like the fact that they got to be the pariah outcast, and they're like, I can get down with that.
And you know what the cool thing is? Imagine if you did. Let's even
character.
But then again,
and that's the thing.
Dad, so
if I were playing a tiefling like that, I might actually be tempted to play one that's like neutral good. I would actually try and play one as well, with a massive flaw that they have this rage or pride in them from this bloodline, and that's something they'd have to overcome. But they basically would try to prove. Would they fall to the dark side? Would they actually overcome this and prove to the world that they can be good people? That's interesting.
Again, that kind of goes back to what style of game you have and what kind of DM you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a spectrum, just like there are for players. And it's funny is that Geek was talking about earlier, that kind of my fun kind of guy, and I kind of was touching on that too. We've all seen that, and it's been around since the dawn of time. A good example of that is that's what I'm just doing what my character would do. That's somebody who's trying to abuse agency from the other way around. They're trying to make everything about agency. Well, it doesn't matter.
The thief who steals the cleric. The thief. Yeah, the thief steals the cleric's holy symbol and tried to ransom it back to them. That kind of shit. It's like, wow, dude, thanks. Okay, well, I'm never healing you.
The sad thing about that phrase, that's what my character would do, is that should be how everybody plays. It has just been pretty much stolen by idiots who use it as an excuse, and thus it has a negative connotation now. It should be
Matt Colville actually. Yeah, Matt Colville actually said that it's literally the Wangrod defense, that they know this argument actually works, but the difference is they think it's like a universal blanket excuse, that it works in all. It's like a Trump. I nearly said it. I nearly said the word that got you demonetized. Yeah. It is. Yeah, it's the Uno reverse card. There we go. It's the Uno reverse card of no matter what I say, this is an ironclad defense, and it's like, no, because it's a contextual defense.
Exactly,
you know,
exactly.
Like, but when a guy fights someone else, right, and nearly bludgeons them to death, right? Why did they do this? Well, was he doing it to defend himself? Okay, that's a good defense. That's fine. He was trying to defend himself from someone trying to hurt him. If you're doing it because he was hitting on your woman, sorry, I don't care what your reasons are. You're going to jail.
I do want to speak to something here that, like, Elle's thrown out a couple of comments.
I've got a lot of comments starred, so I mean, do you want to go through those?
Yeah, we can go to those because I mean, I think there's it's fair also to just say, like, a lot of this is coming from very vocal minority and not necessarily representative of a lot of the majority of the player base.
Yeah, so I just want to say, like, before you get to the comments, the very obvious and common retort to the Wangrod defense is simply consequences. You know, like when the consequences come on the head of the character, and they're, well, I did what my character do. Yeah, and what happened is what happened to your character after he did what he did.
And now it's like
guillotine. It's like if say Geek is that Wangrod thief and he steals my cleric's holy symbol. Well, I'm gonna say, okay, I'm never gonna heal you again, ever. I'm never going to do it. I don't care. You stole my item and made me pay for it back. I don't care. I don't care. Well, you made your agency and you took away mine. So it's like turnabout is fair play.
Exactly. And that is the epitome of agency. It's you have the option to do pretty much what you want, but the world will react to it. What you do has meaning. What you do has effect on the world. It is the direct opposite of a railroad.
And that kind of tips into that tyranny of fun, because and the misunderstanding of what agency is. A lot of people, again, misconstrue agency as the absence of consequence. You know, like, oh, I can do anything and always have maximum fun. And, you know, that's what a lot of the very vocal players are about, and that's totally wrong. I mean, if you want,
it is completely wrong. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Mobius, he can stab me like Geek. Well, just in this hypothetical Geek scenario, of him stabbing me in the back, that's fine. But as soon as he draws that, I'm going to attack him. And plus, unlike the thief, I hit a lot harder, and I have a lot more hit points, and I have much better armor. So.
I'm just going to catch up on the 10 comments that have come in since I've been doing.
We've kind of ramble rage.
Well, no. But see, even though we were rambling, we weren't rambling. We were extrapolating on greater points because we're staying within a framework. That's the thing, you know. And L points out, DK, they would complain if you didn't allow guns in every fantasy game, like T-shirt historian saying your fantasy is stagnant because you never advance in technology. I mean,
I get whining because I don't have rapiers in my game.
I'm going to star that one to come back to it. I'm going to star that one.
Yeah, I mean, in the Apocalypse game I'm designing, I'm treating like automatic guns, like the STG-44, as a magic item. I'm treating firearms as magic items. So I do have guns in the game I'm designing, because that's like part of the almost like of the Western. The gun is the the sword is to Europe, and the spear is to Greece, and the bow is to India. The gun is that mythic weapon of the Western, and apocalypses are a type of Western. So, So,
all right.
Okay. Right. So where have we? I'm trying to think where I've doing a bit of starring.
I suppose Mobius. But players shouldn't be fighting players. I actually am of the opinion I don't like. Okay, I will actually address this direct because I was going to bring this up anyway. Let's say that everyone in the party wants to sell, we'll say, a phylactery back to a lich, and you've got a lawful good paladin and a cleric in the party, and they say no. Well, dude, we all agree. Yeah, I know, but our characters wouldn't do this. We're going to have to fight you then. Fine, then roll initiative. I would actually respect those players more because they are actually using the quote Wangrod defense correctly, because they're actually doing something in accordance to their character's morality. And that I have no problem with.
That's not the Wangrod defense though. That's just
I know. I meant in quotations the Wangrod defense. Yeah, but it's it's an appropriate use of that argument.
Why don't we get to the starred comments?
Yeah, we're gonna get to the starred comments anyway.
We're gonna start up some PvP here.
Yeah. Now the first one I starred, and this is something it helps me, lets me bring in my own campaign that I ran a little while back. Halakar says in his campaign, all the level 0 characters are human. That's all that lives in the region. After they hit first level, they may replace a dead character with other races if the group has met any. Yes, and that again, that is player agency. If your characters go out and meet other races and get on well with those races and take an opportunity to develop contacts and develop good relations within the world, they're developing the world, and it brings in more options for them.
Yeah,
develops
the
game
world is a big reason for those limited races.
Exactly.
We've talked about that with what the requirements for classes and stuff too. It kind of helps set that. Like when I set up even my 5th edition campaign, I gave a little player primer to all my players. I'm like, here's what races are in the area, and while I didn't forbid any of them that were on the list, I'm like, this is kind of their lot in life. There are elves, but they don't get along with the humans. There are dwarves, but they live way the hell out yonder, or they're kind of limited. They're little locals. I had all of that set up, and if somebody wanted to make something that wasn't there, I'm like, all right, you're gonna have to pitch me on it real hard, because I'm the guy who likes to listen and work with folks. But I'm like, you're gonna have to pitch it hard. But
come up with something compelling, something you can work with, something
exactly.
You can
Don't
create,
just make. I'm just another fighter, but I happen to be a kobold. It's just like that's not enough.
Lame.
It's not enough. No, it's not enough. No.
Yeah, it's like, and you could even because even I'm thinking of doing this if a player said I point out to say they there's dwarf clerics in the world, and they're like, well, why can't I play one? Well, because they're rare. And it's like, well, if my wisdom was high enough and I make a new dwarf, say this one dies, and I have a high wisdom, and I find a cleric who could teach me, could I play one? I'd be like, yeah, sure, if you find one. And there might be only one of them. There might only be one of them in the world because they're that rare. Maybe 2 if you're lucky. So if they die, you're kind of stuck because you'll need them to train. If they die, you're screwed, man. You're screwed.
In my 5e game, I told all my players in the current one I'm running, where they've started the 0 level characters from the little village, I told them, there are only 2 wizards of any note in this entire starting region. If you choose to play a magic user, you're going to be one of them. And that means that anybody who needs magic or hates magic is going to be looking to you. And if you're a 0 level dude, that means you're going to be an apprentice to a wizard, and there's none in this town. So really that doesn't work. So I'm like, I just laid it out. I'm like, you can play a wizard. It's just going to change the game. And I'm not wanting to run that game, but also wizards, and that wizard, that magic user rarity has held. Nobody tried to make a wizard. I was so happy because nobody, I laid it out. There are 2 that people. But
I don't want to have to do what an NPC tells me. That's not fair.
I don't have anybody in my group that does that, so I'm lucky.
I know, yeah, but you know there are players who would try and pitch that.
Yes,
they exist.
But I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. I don't think there are that many of them, because in all of my years, I have not run into anybody who was that pissy and moany about stuff. There are people who may have had a really good idea, and part of that is probably my flexibility, but at the same time, when I do put my foot down, I think that reputation as being a flexible GM serves me well, because they're like, okay, look, if he's not wanting it, then clearly there's a reason. If he's gonna put his foot down.
DK, L is confused by the word wang rod. Would you kindly explain it to him?
It is essentially a part of the male body below the waistline and above their knees. It's the thing that's used for sexual reproduction between a lady. Need I go on?
It's exactly what you think it is, L. And you are correct because I've been reading his comments.
Mm-hmm. I'm busy reorganizing my Magic the Gathering cards, so I can't pay attention to chat.
Mm-hmm. Next starred comment. I don't make it as obvious, but player conversations often expands the game, and especially the game world or locale they're in at the time. Yes. And I think as long, I mean,
I thought that said the ESP spell, my bad.
I mean, with the vast majority of games, a good DM will pick up on what players are talking about. I'm assuming this is player conversation in the game. I mean, player conversation out of the game, yes, that can have the same effect as well. But player conversation in the game can help a DM flesh out their world. A good DM will often make notes and think, that's a good idea. Oh, I'll develop that. Oh, they're interested in that. We'll develop that. And again, that's player agency.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of the complaints about agency, and that's a good way of illustrating it. I think perhaps the raging about player agency comes from crap DMs who have been very, very limiting, who don't listen to the things they should listen to. And you're sure Sean can back me up on this too. There's a time for being the hardcore DM and the limiting DM, but there's also times where you're supposed to be listening and supposed to be taking cues and supposed to be responding. And like this comment says, not necessarily always obviously or right away, that talk about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if such and such happened? And then you're like, it doesn't have to poof right away.
I'll go back to Reign of Terror from the weekend game. They were playing the second adventure, the 1794 adventure in there, and one of the characters has an adopted son who he has funded through college, who has become he's studied to be a medic and is about to be deployed in the French army. All the scenario basically says is the party find a book that's written in Latin. Perhaps the adopted son, Cesar, might be able to help them if they need someone to help translate the book, because he has been to medical college and he might understand a bit of Latin. In that game, I
imagine he would, yeah.
In that game, it developed into Cesar having a Paris apartment that he was in the process of moving out of because he was going to be deployed for a very, very long time. They stayed there when they were being pursued by revolutionary guards. They got clean there after they were wandering in sewage for most of the session. They borrowed spare clothes. They needed a weapon, so they acquired a weapon from him. None of that's in the adventure, but it's within the logic of the fiction. So there's the limit initially placed. You are in Paris. You are soldiers.
Yeah.
But there's these little hooks dotted around for the players to then develop. Now, a poor DM would think, well, he can't stay with Cesar. He's only supposed to be here just to help with Latin.
Yeah, he does the book thing, and that's it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whereas, disappearing right back into the void.
Yeah. I mean, my current campaign, there's a trade town. There's like basically where there's a toll bridge, and so that's where all the trade comes through. Even though the character's village is like half a day away from it, because what's going to be more metropolitan, this trade point. And so every time the players go there, they'll be like, "Can I find this here?" And then I'll kind of yes, no. Sometimes I'll have them roll, kind of almost like a luck roll. It's like, over time it's developed that, there are things that I didn't write down about that town that have been influenced by the players' questions and needs and roles we've made. And now there are things that exist in the world out of that agency that they show, that desire to interact with the world in a positive, constructive way.
If you say that, almost players have control. The emphasis is on the players themselves to give themselves agency in those sort of situations,
Yeah.
to interact with the world, to show an interest, and get the DM's creative juices flowing.
Yeah. I mean, as a child of the 80s in America, I can say, it was great. We got all the freedom we wanted to roam around in the neighborhood, but you could screw that. But that was all up to us how much we got, because if you screwed up with it, it went away real fast.
Yes.
So I think a lot of DMs who may have issues with agency may have also run into players who like to abuse it. It's not all bad DMs. There are probably good DMs who have just been burned
by bad players. Yeah.
And vice versa. I think there's two sides to that equation, and there's obviously, and it's not all the players, and it's not, but there are bad DMs who are, no, you can't do that. Well, can we go to the town? Can we travel a week out of our way to go to that city and try and find a sage who can read the scroll? No,
the adventure says you've got to go here.
Or it's too far away. No, you'd never make it in time. Well, why not let the players try?
Let them try. That's the learning experience. That's the adventure.
I think that's actually the crux of what real player. It's initiative. I think you should allow your players to take the initiative. And when they do, when they start asking you, "Can you do this?" It should be fostered, but it should be done with a measured response. I think it should be tempered, because let's be frank, not every idea a player comes up with is really smart or is useful to the party. Let's be honest.
And I mean, I've even told my horror story. There's a player I had who played with me for years, and evidently coming up with really cool crap for him on the fly was still not good enough. So there are going to be those nightmares.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But next comment, Ian says, we allow the DM the power to run the game. Precisely. Yeah. That's the guiding principle. Players have to operate within that framework or they don't have a game. And that is a fact. Yes, it's absolutely right. There is a structure, and any choices the players have are within that structure.
Amen.
Those
Saxius. We have a Saxius.
He must have determined that we weren't on task enough.
I take exception to being allowed the power to run my game. I take the power. It is mine.
Saxius is here to take away all our agency.
No, Saxius.
Guide the conversation.
Saxius wants to give us just enough agency to make us squirm.
No.
But that's about it.
We have agency to wrap a noose around our neck.
You have the agency to have your opinions, however wrong they may be.
Yeah, exactly. And I am very wrong a very many amount of times in my life.
Yes. Before we jump to the next starred comment, there's one thing that when I was thinking about agency, I'm wondering how much of the yelling about player agency comes from the view of an adversarial relationship between DM and players, as we've kind of been pointing out here with bad players, bad DMs, and then looking back at older versions of D&D, which kind of goes back to a comment that Elle had.
It's the next one I've starred.
Oh well, then I'll shut up and I'll mention it when we get there, because Mages demonstrates this pretty well in his review caps, how older styles of gaming kind of took that kind of assuaged that. But go ahead.
Anyway, Saxius, would you like to give us a little bit of a spiel on what you think about player agency? The things we've all had a bit of a rant so far.
Player agency is a unique thing, because in many sense it's difficult to take away the player agency, because they will still be making a lot of the choices for their characters, and it's, as a GM, it's very difficult to take that away from them. Often what I find the discussions boils down to is the contract between how structured and what kind of a North Star do you want your game to have, versus how freeform do you want it to go. So to me, it's very much it's a game by game and a group by group basis. It's very difficult to give broad strokes to, because each game is going to be structured differently.
I've already brought up our Shadow of the Demon Lord game as a game where there's a massive amount of agency for the players within the game, within the structure of the game world. But there's a lot of the world that the details have been defined by us.
Yeah,
we haven't defined the world, but a lot of the little details in it are defined by us.
That's a very good example to give, especially since from the very beginning I turned around and said, like, okay, well, we need to establish where the goblins live. Well, they live in a barn.
Yeah.
What's the barn like?
Yeah.
And then from there to that is details relevant to the players. The agency is been deferred to the players. Now, the world has already established goblins are second-class citizens. Yeah. That's a fact. You won't get around that, but the players will work within that. And it's been progressing throughout the entire campaign of the Shadow of the Demon Lord, where the players are allowed, or they're given the opportunity to put forth the agency or their input towards the immediate surroundings of their characters.
I'm not a second-class citizen. I got promoted to dog.
I think I summarized it best in our last game. Summarizing the Shadow of the Demon Lord games will only come across as being insane, as us being absolutely insane. The things we do, say, and accomplish in that will make no sense to anyone who does not participate or listen to the insane ramblings.
Yeah, precisely.
Then again,
precisely. Yes, and they are insane ramblings. Right, next comment. I think Elfbait wanted to talk about this one, so while he's gone, I'm going to just skip past this one, and I'm going to jump to this one. Player agency from Alchemic Raker. Player agency is the freedom of player choices within the game world, which is basically what you've just been saying, Saxius. Not the freedom for players to insert whatever they want in the game world. That depends on the DM. I mean, the DM give you. We were able to insert that goblin barn, as long as we was. If you'd have said we live in an ostentatious castle with all the luxuries, you'd have probably turned around and says, "No, you're second-class citizens. Be sensible." We engaged with the fiction of the world, and that so you realised you could trust us to go with the world as it's laid out, and create something that's suitable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I also find it kind of interesting though, because this kind of popped into my head. Like, people often forget that the Dungeon Master is himself a player, and a lot of these players will say,
Dungeon Master is God.
No, I mean in the sense like, yeah, if he's a player, and so whenever a player demands something that the Dungeon Master doesn't want, you're taking away a player's agency. The Dungeon Master's agency to design a world as he sees fit, as he or she sees fit. And I think that is incredibly unfair.
Well, a lot of this is going to be boiling down to the usual social contract of give and take. You know, as a player, if you come in and you demand anything, I mean, assuming that you've got a Dungeon Master that will tolerate that kind of behavior, as in specifically demand, saying I will have this, or you will insert this, those kinds of absolutes are usually not going to get you very far. But often, well, with what's being said here, at the very least, a player can come in, like if we use 5th edition, for example, and they can say, I want to play a Tabaxi. And the Dungeon Master might go, oh, well, we haven't really inserted Tabaxi in here. You could be an exotic character that you'll bring in there. At that point, again, the agency is being met, and the Dungeon Master is willing to work that into the story, maybe with a little bit of flavoring of like you're unusual, you're different in that sense. But the very sense, there's still like a certain, as John said, there's a certain fiction, there's a buy-in that the players have to agree to. So if the group says we are playing in medieval Europe for fantasy, coming in and saying like I want to play an Aztec warrior in a European setting, at that point it's like, well, you're not doing the buy-in here. Or equally so if you're playing, Spanish conquistadors, traveling to Central America, and you're now, having to experience all of the wonderful, terrifying things that, happened during these things, then, there's a buy-in of what you can and can't be. You wouldn't expect to be a Chinese Wu Jin. class showing up along with all these Spanish or Latin characters that would be arriving. It's the buy-in. Like if the player can't buy into the fiction and work within it, and that's usually where a lot of the conflict that I see or read stems from.
I think we are going to have to discuss the pointers at some point in the stream about how DMs are perceived in gaming, and how the role of the DM is currently portrayed, certainly in social media.
Yeah,
because I think there's a lot of false information out there.
Yeah, it really again, it depends where you go, but I've certainly seen it where the DM is supposed to be the entertainment provider, or that the assumption. I don't hold to that. Well, to some degree, maybe, but yeah, the expectation is they're there to entertain you.
Yeah, the DM is not a player himself. The
Yeah.
DM is
I said
he's a functionary of the game.
He's just a referee, and that's it. Yeah, they're very wrong. Very wrong.
A game lives and dies by whether the DM is enjoying running it.
Yeah. If a player doesn't show up, the game can go on. If the DM doesn't show up, there is no game.
Precisely.
Yeah. And the DM needs to be having fun. Otherwise,
I was actually saying that. It literally is like if a player demands something from the DM and he says no, well, you're taking away the DM's agency.
Yeah, I started to mention earlier, kind of like how Mage's games demonstrate some of the earlier ways to alleviate some of that concept of agency being taken away by the DM through a use of a lot of mechanics that left it up to the dice. They gamified it, and I think that is, as that has eroded from the game, the concept of DM versus player has seemed to increase. But at the same time, speaking as to the DM as a player, that also allows the DM to have fun, and you can see it because in his review caps, you can see that there is a certain amount of joy and entertainment for him as the DM in watching things unfold out of his particular control and just letting the dice fall as they may.
Well, I was going to say that speaks to my style. Over the years, I came to realize that I am best served as a player at the table myself by being an arbiter of the scenarios rather than a storyteller, rather than somebody who's railroading a plot. And I have found I get the most enjoyment too, because things happen that are a surprise. I don't know what player, if I don't know what player's going to do, like sometimes, they're in a situation, it's a carryover. Okay, I know where they are, I can prep, but I get a lot of fun and even a little bit of nervousness when, I don't know what's going to go on. God, I hope they're going to have fun. And then they make choices and I adjust, I react, I make it happen. And then boom, we're all surprised by what has transpired. And it's interesting.
Yeah, I got to speak to that. The last few sessions I have had a chance to run, I have done away with a lot of my while I don't railroad and I don't overplan, I've done a lot of off the cuff, running of the game. And I've had so much more fun. Even with my 5th edition stuff, just kind of just playing it from here rather than here,
Yeah, but it's something you learn as you become more confident DMing. Is all those off the cuff bits and pieces. Right, I'm going to come to this. Comment here from L now. Agency per edition. Did it change? Where, when, and why? Yes, I will say that the way that an edition of any game frames the mechanics has a big impact on the potential for agency within the game. There'll be those who will argue wrongly, for example, that basic D&D denies players agency because it's got racist class and all of that. I would argue that through the simplicity of the rules, if you've got a DM who is competent, you have far more agency than you will have in later editions where you've got lists of skills which draw you in to use them and almost make you play from the character sheet.
Yeah.
I can see that no one wants to make a comment on that.
Oh, no, sorry, I was
No,
typing. I was
sorry.
responding to Michael.
I'm still organizing my cards, but no, it's.
I was eating toast.
I didn't even know which edition to begin with.
Okay, yeah, it's fair. Okay, we'll start with.
I do agree with you there, because I think honestly, when players had less on their sheet and more of their play came from them, and the player themselves was challenged, was really the game was designed to challenge the player more so than the character. I do feel like players probably felt a greater degree of agency. I mean, we'll leave edge cases out. There's always been crappy DMs and crappy players, but I think the core conceit of the game did lean towards player agency being higher on the level of awareness, because it was
one of the go-to examples of me that I really enjoyed, and I always remember it, and one of the smartest things I ever did in a game was there was this room with a frog statue in it, and I suspected there were hidden doors. So I had an item that let me use X-ray vision, and there was a secret door. I also spied that there was a lever inside the statue, and I realized, okay, as soon as we pull that lever inside the statue, the mouth's going to slam shut. We're going to be trapped inside. So I pulled out my bag, pulled out a rope, made a slip knot, pulled it, hooked it onto the thing, pulled it, and I was right. That's exactly what happened. As soon as I pulled the lever, the secret door opened and the mouth slammed shut. Had that been in a more recent game, I would have probably had a saving throw or a check to discover it. No, the fact that I was allowed to figure it out on my own left it in not the character's agency, but the player's agency. And I think that's actually probably what the problem is. They can't. In the old school, we have a much easier time of diverting the player from the character.
Yeah,
and you can see it in the way that published modules would be written. Yeah. They'll be like, there is a door hidden behind the painting on the wall. Mm-hmm. No rules text. Just there's a door hidden behind the painting on the wall is all the description would say. Modern games will have there's a door hidden behind the painting on the wall.
DC 15 investigation check.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a problem, because that same scenario can be played the same. Mm-hmm. But I think where it primes the mind of the DM and the player that there is necessarily supposed to be an exchange of game mechanic there.
Yes.
Yeah.
You could.
But it also
a good DM, a good modern DM to finish that would read both of those situations exactly the same. There, you see a painting on the wall. You don't see whatever the room description is. There's no other doors out of this room, but there's a painting on the wall, and I mean context is going to be of course important. Maybe they followed an NPC in there, or they chased a monster in there, and he's not in there when they get there.
The way I would see that sort of situation, if I was running that for 5th edition, and I know it's probably not strictly by the rules of the game, if the player then said, okay, I'm going to move the painting and look behind it, they will find that door.
They will find
it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If they say to me, is there something odd about the painting? That's when I'd roll the check.
Yeah, and but again, that's talking about differences in editions. I think the later editions, because they put that into the rules. Yes. And then into the description of the room, we're already going in there with this expectation that there's going to be a mechanical aspect to that encounter.
But here's the other thing, and it loops back to what I was saying about choices mattering. If it is assumed that it's almost like baked into the adventure, like you said, that it's almost guaranteed that they're going to find it, though then the choice doesn't matter. What if they have to proceed without that leads to a secret room with, say, we'll just lack for a better word, a plot-centric important item to the module? Well, now they have to progress without it, and they got a worse ending because they didn't get it. Well, that would mean they'd have to be more careful in the future. Look for secret doors. That choice mattered.
We're kind of going beyond the point I was trying to make there. My point is talking about how the differences in editions have changed the expectations on the game, which have affected agency.
I mean, if we take, for example, 3rd edition, where the mechanics were baked in for, well, basically pressing for the players having the agency by turning around saying, well, you have got all of these skills, all of these things that you can do.
Oh yeah, the micro skills.
yeah, exactly. All the way down to like, how do you tie rope? It's like, well, here you go. Here's a skill for that.
Rope use the skill.
Exactly. Like it got cleaned up later, but the point being is like that's how detailed they went into it to basically justify that the characters can do this. You don't need to have a proficiency. You don't need to have this. Or here's how you skill how it works. That's how they were trying to go about it. But we have to account for different edition styles because the editions do change what kind of style and what.
I will say that's a shift away from player agency in terms of interacting with the world, but shifting more towards the characters interacting with the world. And that might be where the idea that player agency is in the creation of the character rather than acting in the world itself. And I think that's possibly beginning at 3rd edition.
Well, at least within the 3rd edition, what they came out and said, because in the AD&D and older systems, what you had was each class was unique. They had their niche protection and so forth. In the 3rd edition and 3.5, what you found was that a lot of them would be overlapping. Some of them would still have their niches, but you'd still find that the players, they would have the agency of like, here's the character and the class that you have. The agency that you have that you want to do is going to be reinforced by you having all of these things literally printed out in front of you to tell you you can do this.
Yeah.
But it then came with a penalty of like, well, a fighter is not going to be as perceptive as, for example, a thief. Ergo, there was a mechanical imbalance between, who could do what rather than being stats or skills. So forth. The mechanics were there to help with certain parts of the agency, but it was not. It caused a very different interpretation, which is why we have the whole, saying of like, oh, if the players look down at the character sheet for an answer, then that's
I think you're hitting on something right there with this, actually, to the second part of his question, which is where, when, and why. Mm-hmm. I think third edition may be where we saw it change, because running 3rd edition being so crunchy and so specific about everything, it really did not leave you in the mindset of flexible DMing and allowing people to do things, because if they went off track, coming up with something that was sound within the framework of 3.5 was really hard. I mean, you could wing it and you could just throw, but it was so mechanically crunchy that it was really hard to necessarily stay within the parameters of their very tightly wound set of mechanics. And that may be where it started to change, that whole like inflexible DM who just can't afford to go off off the rails or off the script there, because that is an undertaking.
Because we did see practically an entire generation of DMs who started with 3.5 and continued with 3.5 and Pathfinder onwards, where this became the way of running games. And many who then, went from 3.5 into 5th edition, it's still very much, what are the mechanics, what's the number crunching behind it, because it's a very difficult thing to get out of.
The rules for grappling?
No, because I always told players to get out of my table.
Exactly, but that's a wonderful indication of it's a very solid indication of how bad of a situation the rules in 3.5 were.
I know, it's like
because grapple was what, a whole page.
Yes, it was a whole page because it was about
in 10-point font.
Yes, you initiating the grapple, the opponent immediately getting a free attack of opportunity, assuming that they hadn't used their free attack of opportunity already. Then you would be doing an opposed. Then you were doing your.
There was so much to it.
Okay, yeah, it was like you had to do your grapple roll. Then there was by strength roll. Then you had to maintain the grapple. Then there would have to be opposed again.
Meanwhile, 5th edition's like, okay, roll a strength check against each other. Whoever wins. Whoever gets the higher result wins.
Exactly.
And Call of Cthulhu does something similar. It's like, okay, whoever gets the highest result, wins that challenge. I mean, but for whatever reason, 3rd edition decided that they needed to hire a lawyer to write those rules.
Yeah, but again, there's a number of things that happened, but that's beside the point. But I think we saw at least player, DM, and culturally. There was a big change in the hobby when 3rd edition came in, and that's also a reflection of the fact that there was a change of management and ownership of TSR, and with Wizards of the Coast stepping in, there was a change. So it's a new direction that they were taking it altogether. Even from 2nd edition, which was trying to initially start out being an updated 1st edition, and then moving on to becoming 2.5. It's
Sean, did I hear you trying to dive in at one point there?
No, I'm just listening.
I thought I heard you trying to dive in and say something. But...
No, I mean, I was looking at Muktuk's comment there, and he's well, he makes a good point. There's a lot of people will be based on their exposure from whether it be tabletop or computer games, and I've certainly brought in new players who are used to computer RPGs, and they're just blown away by the freedom you get at a tabletop game. They're used to the railroad computer game. Baldur's Gate was a big one. One of my current players came in. He'd only ever played Baldur's Gate, and so he figured it was the same. I have a whole story mapped out, and you get a little bit of freedom to move around, but ultimately it's to the same end.
Yeah, I think that kind of leans towards the opposite direction of worrying about agency. People who come in from computer games aren't expecting as much agency as they're allowed.
Yeah.
But the first part of his thing, while editions don't completely dictate the agency issue, they certainly have an effect on it.
They have an effect, and I mean the whole mention of computer games leads into the next comment that I had starred. Actually, this has happened again, and I know Ian's had to go, but Ian McDonald said this: RPGs allow way more player agency for choices and decisions than any other type of game. Correct, but those choices have to take place within a coherent framework, or they are just a random mess.
Yeah.
I don't know, the randomness can be fun once in a while, but
once in a while. But if you're going to have a long a campaign, a meaningful campaign that has consistency, then you've got to have that framework in place. But I think he summed it up very, very nicely with that comment, which is why I started.
Yeah.
But so thank you, Ian. If you were listening back on Thursday or Friday, whenever, I did read your comments. I know you've had to go. But going back to the point of mechanics, the next one I've starred here, John says this: even with saves at the end of each round, they dislike spells like Hold Person, and you can see that they've adjusted game mechanics to keep players involved because I believe it's because they're worried about
players getting bored or frustrated.
Players getting bored, and spells that traditionally are said to have taken away player agency. Well, to me, they're just consequences. They're just consequences.
That touches on that touches on something else regarding. There's a lot of players feel that unless they're always doing something, they're missing out on the game. And this has affected the way games are designed. Like the classic Magic user, you get your one spell, and then when it's done, you're done for the day. Whereas now everybody gets unlimited cantrips and multiple spells. But whenever I hear the complaint about somebody playing a Magic user at first level, well, I only get my one spell, then I'm useless. It's like, are you still a human being with thoughts? Then you're not useless.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing: you can throw a dagger, you can throw a flask, you can hold a torch, you can map things.
Everything isn't all combat either.
Yeah, I've seen
exactly.
wizards do things in combat. Old school wizards do things in combat that weren't necessarily fighting, but were like, I'm going to try and distract the goblin over there they'll do something else.
Or I'm going to give
while everybody else is fighting the skeletons, I'm going to look for the lever in the room that opens up the stone.
Or I'm going to deliver potions.
Whatever.
Let me give you an anecdote from this past weekend. I told you about my friend from Boston who was trying old school for the first time.
Yeah.
For our Saturday game, he took an elven wizard, and when he rolled his spells, he got almost no combat spells. I think Burning Hands was the only one he got, but he got Hold Person, he got ESP, things like that. Or not Hold Person, Hold Portal. And, he didn't complain. He was looking at it. And rather than saying, oh, what a useless spell, I won't get anything done, he started brainstorming, silently to himself, how can I make this useful? And then what he did is when they were in a fight, they were fighting a bunch of kobolds and they needed information. So he positioned himself in the corner of the room and he says, okay, there's only one other exit. If they try to escape, I'm going to cast Hold Portal on that door to keep them from going. It's like, that's great. He didn't have to. They ended up capturing kobolds because they're, a higher level. But and later in the same session, one of the characters fell through a pit trap with a mechanical closing mechanism on the pit trap. And I didn't plan this. This was in a module. And they had to fish him out, but they couldn't open the thing. So they set off the trap again. And he used Hold Portal to hold the pit trap open while they fished the player out.
Very smart. Very smart of him.
It was great.
I know in a lot of our old games, not to go on too great of a tangent over the magic user, but the magic user was usually the guy in the party who had like the acid on him also, and he had he had the chalk and the other things that would be useful, in the adventure.
And he
also
he has
seemed
the
to
high
be like
intelligence.
he's the big brain, so he's gonna have. You could also justify that he might have like some simple solvents or whatever, alchemical crap and stuff like that. But that's also the same. Got to be doing something all the time. Goes back to why there's a big outcry against things like counterspell. Counterspell right now in the greater griposphere is constantly under attack for taking away the fun of magic users. What's the point of casting a spell if the bad guy can just counter it? Well, first of all, he can only do it so often. I can tell you from recent encounters that I've had, even in 5th edition, my magic user, the bad guy spellcasters are not spending all of their slots on counterspelling your magic. They're gonna want to get offensive spells out too. So yes, they can, but that's it's one of those edge case arguments. It's like, yes, sure, potentially they could counter everything you can do, but isn't that sort of the essence of magic fights? I cast a spell. No, you don't. We see it in movies all the time.
Here's the other thing of it as well. Let's even look at another way of the intelligence thing. The wizard, if you don't have an elf or a dwarf who don't have extra languages, if you have high intelligence, you can negotiate with other people.
Yes.
Because you have high intelligence.
Into other topics we've had about the whole erosion of class niche in the party too. Like, hey, the magic user was that guy. Now everybody's that guy.
Yeah.
So, anyways.
Yeah. But no,
as in Muktuk here has mentioned, his mate, I think ventriloquism, along with spells like Phantasmic Force, in the hands of a creative player, can be one of the most effective first low-level spells.
If you have an imaginative player and an open-minded DM, illusionists are some of the most powerful spellcasters in the game.
Obi-Wan Kenobi achieved great things with basically the ventriloquism spell.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
suggestion spell. Yeah.
Yeah, the sound of a crat dragon, the click of something. Hey, what was that over there?
I mean, look at the fact when he first appeared, all he did was throw up a hood and make a weird googly oogly noise, and then the fucking
call.
I didn't know that was called. Yeah, and it's chased off the Sand Raiders. Is that what they're called? Sand Raiders?
Sand people, Tusken Raiders.
Yeah. Tusken Raiders. That was it. Yeah.
Carl.
It's just.
He's not the judge you're looking for. All... You can go about his business.
Yeah. Hello. Exactly. I was just about to say that. Yeah. Hello there. It's just like it's so true though. It's so true. Like it just. I think the fact that it just comes down to the fact that if you stare at your character sheet too long, you stop thinking for yourself. And I think that's kind of the crux of the problem. You have to start thinking outside the box. You're an adventurer. Adventurers don't have character sheets in the world. Use your brain.
Yeah. I mean,
and if you don't, just beat something to death with your big sharp metal bar. That helps.
Back to agency.
I like El's comment. Mages rolls ventriloquism every day. He makes a video.
It's not ventriloquism. It's cantrip for prestidigitation to change my voice.
Yeah. Goddamn.
You also cast darkness on your surroundings as well, don't you?
I do, yes. I have to simulate the soul gem.
Yes. But what is the spell for summon, Teddy Bear Bib? But
well, the command word is Dollarama.
Oh, there we go.
Dollarama.
An emphasis on the dollar.
So I'm looking back. What's actually what you say?
Well, I was just going to say, and let's bring it back to the agency, because a lot of, at least when it comes to wizards, just in general, the wizards have got a lot of utility that they can bring out, but that can also help shape the agency of the group of what they want to do. I mean, how each player combines into work for one another for what they as a group wants to do. And then that group can then decide, it's the agency that they wish to pursue, an objective with the methods, all of these other things. That's what they, as the players and characters, can establish. But that's what's called. What I'm really just trying to say is that the characters are there to provide the tools by which the players can have the agency to decide how to pursue an objective.
Yeah. I'm going to sort of move on from that. I mean, in that I think the fact that in more modern editions of the game, the specific wording of the rules, the language that is used, particularly with regards to spells, has had an impact on how the players react to the world. It's when the wording is so specific, there's less wriggle room, less room for imagination, and less room for creativity.
At the same time, that seems a natural evolution from older spells that were nebulously worded and created a lot of arguments and confusion.
Yeah. It's that balance of game.
It is that it's a different approach to rule writing, but I do feel that that's taken away, on the subject of agency, taken away player agency, because there was more of a sense of players trying to be creative with what was written. I think in the older editions, when the language was vaguer.
But at the very same time, that's also what then led to abuse of the vagueness.
Of course, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the reason why you would then see the pendulum swinging in the direction of we have to be more. The rules have to be more lawyered up.
Where is the best balance? It depends on the group, doesn't it? It just depends on.
Well, you can go through every single edition and just sort of go through, which flavor of this spell is what you want to go for. I mean, one of my players says that the edition that he goes back to, he prefers first and second edition purely because of how the wish spell is worded. Because he thinks that it's way too stringent in third edition onwards. He wants much more flexibility for how the wish, how that is.
I do find some people like to cherry pick their spells from editions too, though. I like this spell from. I will say, fifth edition does a pretty good job on its spells. While a lot of them may not be as overall powerful as they used to be, they definitely are easier to understand and run. So if you're talking about that balance of game, also they've parted out a couple of spells into multiple spells now too. So
I find the way they're worded very uninspiring.
That is true, But from a mechanical standpoint, as far as how to run them in a game, they're very
cleaner.
good.
Yeah,
they're very good. I mean, the fireball spell included and I'll always say it included a mini lesson on physics. But
yeah.
Well, like volume, basically. Yeah.
Well, no, and also just and how it will flow down.
Yeah.
It was very long. in including how it worked.
Well, I mean, it makes sense if you're going to.
And First Ed's so delicious when the players underestimate how much space they need.
It's like, well, I mean, if you're going to enact a kinetic blast of that amount of force that it encompasses 20 feet and can like vaporize like low-level monsters, of course there's going to be blowback. Why wouldn't there be?
One of the best examples, I don't know if it's actually something that came up in one of his games or one of the things he just concocted for one of his episodes, but Seth Skorkowski has his players using a wall of force and a fireball to create a shaped charge to burn a hole through a door.
With me thrill door, it was insane. It was so cool.
I'm like, huh.
Yeah, how? Sense. Yeah, I was like, huh. Like, and he's like, wow, of course it worked. Actually, why don't you guys try it and find out?
Well, that's playing. The one thing about those older spells is I think a lot of them were written by people who had a certain level of scientific understanding, or maybe engineers and the stuff too.
Well, I mean, Arneson was like a PhD, but also a touch of the obsession and the tisms and the math. Let's be honest. So
I don't think you have to have any of that to write that stuff. I just, I mean, my neighbor guy, if I ever played D&D with him, he'd be a nightmare. His whole field is material specialist. He's a materials specialist. So he knows how metals and resins and all of those things work in a witchcraft level of understanding. And playing any game with him would be a nightmare. Fortunately, he wasn't into RPGs. Music and remote controlled airplanes was his thing. But
that's a whole other topic. People's real life expertises and how they influence the game.
Having a team of some players who were all ex-soldiers, that changed how I had to DM very quickly.
I actually got stage fright trying to run a military game for a bunch of vets. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable running this game because I feel like
I have no idea what I'm doing.
I'm going to come across as Mr. Hollywood, and your guys are going to be like, nope, that's not how it is.
That's not how it is. But sort of on the topic of player agency, we talked with the Wangrod defense earlier. I think it's important. We can't gloss over how having players with full agency will lead to conflict and resolving those conflicts, both between players and, of course, characters.
Oh yeah.
Like I know I'm okay with PvP, with the caveat that the players have to have the maturity to be able to separate their characters from themselves. And I know which of my groups can and can't do that. But I mean, where do you guys stand on that?
For me, PvP is like, if it's deserved. I don't encourage or really like to have people just actively engage in PvP, but if there's a reason for it in character, like that I can say that they can justify, then I'm okay with it.
I agree with Mage. I will allow it if I feel I can trust the players to deal with it.
Yeah. Because it's like what I said, like if it comes down to like if I were the lone lawful good and you guys, like say, just using you guys as an example, that you wanted to say side with the Demi-Lich. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let you. And as long as we're all on the same page, I'm not doing it to be a jerk. I'm doing it because this is legitimately something.
I would step in there and say, why are you running a lawful good character in an evil party?
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, it might not even be. They might not even be evil. They might have been like neutrally aligned, and we just got along up until that point.
I've never been in a campaign where the big bad made so much sense that you just turn around and go, you know what? maybe he's not that bad after all.
That's really a hard one to discuss in isolation, that particular scenario that you're coming up with too, DK, because I mean, why are they giving the Demi-Lich back his soul? Is it one of those?
I think that's the example that was given in that case. But
exactly. I'm just saying that for me, it was like, I can see it. There are a lot of potential reasons why you might give it back. You know, giving it back to him prevents an even worse evil, and therefore the paladin's going to be on board. You know.
Oh yeah, I'm just looking at it from the perspective of that they're doing it for pure self-interest. Like they're being like, you know, like, they're going to pay us.
At that point, any justification or rationalization is out the window.
I think
they're doing it for.
I think Sean has brought out a very good point. When it comes to PvP, I remove player agency because I have seen friendships torn apart because of PvP. I have lost friends because of PvP. So I simply tell the group, I won't allow PvP. I'm not interested as a dungeon master in seeing PvP, and that the group can then work together to to sort out their differences, because I have wasted enough time and lost too many good groups to justify me just letting that be a thing with me as the DM.
It's limiting my agency, man.
And I don't care.
Some of it comes down to how
still
often
pay taxes. You don't have agency in that either.
Some of it comes down to how often do you play, how long are your sessions for. If you're playing for 3 hours every month, do you want to waste those 3 hours with the whole group bickering? And the simple answer is no.
No.
Unless it's entertaining bickering in character, which can actually be a lot of fun. But so long as the players are bought in, right?
Exactly. You've got to be able to trust your players. You've got to be able to trust your players to allow conflict. I mean, one of my default house rule for treasure is that nothing belongs to anybody until they leave the dungeon or whatever the environment is, get to a place of safety, and officially, in an organized manner, divide it up. Until that point, if a thief tries to steal treasure, he's stealing from party loot and putting it back into party loot. Sorry. Once they have then gained their treasure and split it all out and decided where they're storing it or what they're doing with it, maybe then things can happen. But until that point, I don't want to have arguments over, I saw it first, it's mine, I grab it. So I nip that in the bud straight away by saying, no, you're not going to do that. You're sharing it out. You don't own it until you get out and you divide it up. And it's up to you lot how you divide it up when you're out. But while you're in the adventure, it's shared.
I'm the opposite. I just let it's a free for all. Let the players do what they're going to do, and they will generally act in character. We had Bob the assassin was always using pickpockets to filch gems and stuff before the other players could catch him, and everybody. I mean, the players at the table were aware, and everybody's always howled when he succeeded, or even funnier when he failed and had to come up with excuses. Right?
Again, you trust your players to deal with that. Certainly, I brought that in for a specific group who we always got together on a Friday night. Most of the time, we'd all had for most of us, it was the end of a week at work and letting our hair down a bit. And there were a few people in that group who did enjoy trolling the others a little bit. So I thought I don't want them bickering. I don't want them all falling out, which could happen because I can see one or two of them get a bit fed up when one of them in particular is in a slightly trolley mood. So I took steps to calm him down. I could have kicked him out of the group, but he was out of game. He was all their friend. He was a friend of all of theirs, and the measures I took fixed that. Yes, you could argue I took away a bit of his agency, but it made the game better for everybody else.
But his agency would then impede upon the fun of the others, and
Exactly.
I would rather have the fun of the majority outrule the minority.
And that just brings us back to, everybody has agency, but you are still operating within the parameters that have been set up by the DM, set up by the group. Playing with it.
More often than not, whenever I talk to some of my other players, I often just hear that when these games are run, the DMs often sort of function much like a teacher. You've got to look after the players and make sure that the certain objectives are at the very least achieved, because you have to mediate very often between different players. You have to mediate and give out the sessions, which much like lessons themselves, but that is the whole thing of like the presentation, the communication, the ability to bring forth the teamwork within group projects. That's often how you can almost like interpret it. But at the very same time, it's down for it's the agency of the player, both in and out of game, to decide whether or not they want to engage with what's happening in front of them.
I'm just going to respond to Mobius's comment here. He says, in first edition, a thief that doesn't try to pilfer a few objects gets a bad rating and has to train longer. I would counter that by saying, if the thief has balanced that out with scaling a few walls to observe, hiding in shadows, listening, looking for traps, attempting to open locks, generally trying to use their ability to surprise enemies at the beginning of combat to get a backstab in, that sort of thing. Then that will counteract. A thief doesn't have to be stealing, but the thief can also try and steal from NPCs and monsters. It doesn't have to try to steal from fellow players.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the rating goes, you want to consider, it's important to consider the full breadth of the way the characters play, the players playing the character. A good aligned thief, which in first ed thieves could be neutral good. That is the only good alignment available to them, but it's possible. Isn't necessarily going to be stealing everything, but as you say, they're going to be checking for traps and using stealth to scout and all that. So they're still operating within the parameters of the party to get a good rating. I get it why when they say thieves should be thieves to get their rating, but you still have to consider the context within the party function and their alignment, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. The whole pickpockets thing, like a lot of the class abilities, has often a broader use than just actually picking a pocket. It's also the skill that you would use for, sneakily pulling something off the table at a meeting, or so there are things that the thief could do that aren't necessarily PvP or even PvE monster. It's other forms of PvE.
Yes. And that's I want my players to focus on them versus the environment, and not them versus each other. I think that's the best way to phrase it for what I like. Anyhow, I don't use those ratings in first edition anyway. I think the 1,500 gold pieces per week, per level, whatever it is sufficient. So, any bloodshed yet? No bloodshed. No. In fact, we've pretty much hammered the topic. We
hammered it into submission. It no longer has agency.
Absolutely. But I think the simple fact is, it's not a contentious topic for us. We can see where people are getting it wrong. We pretty much agree that though the people who shout about it on social media, they're going to be in the minority. I think as in with most things, the silent majority are probably much more sensible. But it's just the idiots on social media who shout louder than everybody else, who make it a thing.
There are idiots on social media.
Oh, I know, right? It's so shocking when I first heard it, my dude.
But they're the ones that shout and scream and bawl about it, and they're the ones who make it a thing. And make how many people will read those comments and think, are they right? How many people who are new to the game will read those comments and think, are they right? Is that the way it should be?
Yeah.
And I think it's up to the likes of us to, even if we're going to get hammered with downvoted or whatever, who cares? I think it's up to the likes of us to put them straight.
Yeah, it's funny. I've actually run into situations on social media where I have come in to provide a different point of view or a more tempered tempered take on those any comment and been hammered. It's just social media. It's just Facebook. Why are you arguing here? I'm like, and exactly like you said, I don't know where somebody's going to come into the game, and I don't know who's going to read that comment. And so, yes, some guy in the thread may just be completely off his freaking rocker when it comes to his point of view. But if nobody else is going to counter that point of view or provide, not necessarily counter, but provide some context or some
evidence to the contrary,
some more objective look at it too. I mean, you see it a lot of times. You hear me talk about it. A lot of this is just bullshit that that gets conjured up by somebody who's just wanting to make an argument, or from very small samples, that are very loud. I have yet to encounter a ton of stuff that gets talked about in my life as a gamer. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but is it everywhere? At the same time, I don't completely deny it when I hear people talking about it. But yeah, there's somebody's always going to find a way to bitch about it. I mean, I used to my nephew used to have a thing that do, and I used to say, you could probably hand him ice cream covered with money, and he'd find a way to gripe about it.
I've seen comments to the with the general idea that if a DM does not allow a player's desired character path to play out, an outcome to play out, then they're denying that player that player agency. And again, that's wrong. That is wrong. A DM does not have to allow a player. If you come into a game and say, "I want my character to become king of this land," well,
I mean,
the DM,
you can try.
The DM says, "Okay, yeah, you can try," but it's up to you how you go about it, and it may or may not work, and that's player agency, letting the player try for that sort of thing, have it as a goal, but it has no bearing on whether they get there in the end. Anyhow,
I think we've all reached a consensus.
We have,
majority. Yeah.
Yes. It wasn't a contentious topic for us.
No.
And instead, we're all focused on talking to L here about his hatred of AD&D.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Or his desire to misquote people.
Yeah, and
or attribute things to folks who didn't say them.
But I don't want to take L's agency away to love the game he loves.
Yeah.
He's allowed to love Basic Expert. Yeah, I'm an OD&D guy. It's my preference, but doesn't mean it works for everyone. So
here's something on topic. You've got a new player who's nervous. You know how new players can get. They're still overwhelmed by the game. How do you encourage them to open their mind and make the choices without expectation of result? How do you bring them out of their shell?
I always start my games with new people by telling them not to worry about the mechanics and just tell me what you want to do. Use the plain English as and don't worry about it being flowery or descriptive. Just start with the basics. I want to open the door, because then and then I'll tell them, like, ask me your basic question. I can then ask you follow-ups, and this is how we learn. Player says, "Okay, I want to open the door." Okay, I can ask him, "Okay, how are you approaching the door?
Yeah.
How would you like to open that door?" And then he can tell me more. And then, of course, pull the training wheels off later on, once he's done it enough times, and like, I'm not trying to handhold him too much, but just to get them used to presenting ideas and options and without feeling like there's a lot of onus on them to provide some flowery, dramatic statement,
or even to frame what they do using the game mechanics. I would much rather they don't frame them using game mechanics. I'd much rather they say, okay, I would like to search that pile of refuse. I don't want them to
investigation
say,
check.
Investigation check or perception check or whatever. No, I would like to say, I want to say to me, the emphasis is on me, the DM, to describe the situation, and I would say to them, and you just tell me how you want to interact with what I've described, and I'll deal with the numbers.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. One other thing I do very early on, if I've got new players, is I make a bit of a fool of myself. I'll get up and talk in character and stomp around the room if it's in person, and make a big sort of show of being in character. And then, having made a fool of myself, I'll often sit down and say, you don't need to do that. You can do it if you want. You don't have to. But it's just to show there's nothing to be embarrassed about.
Yeah, it dissipates the tension. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're all just friends here. We're all here to sit down and play our nerdy ass games of elves and dwarves and spells.
But simplifying the interaction a bit, at least the steps, to where it's something that they can approach, modularly, often helps, at least with the people I played with. That way they don't. Go ahead, Sexus.
I was just going to say, if you're going to bring it back to new player, first beginning, often for me, I often basically try to scale it way down and really put emphasis on this is it's a story, it's for them to enjoy. I will translate what they tell me. Talk to me, tell me what you want to achieve, like you said, El, and from there you build on it. And I basically give them the flowery description so that they can have that painting in their head to sort of immerse them in. I'll ask them okay, so you're in this sort of thing, but you have now possibly look to the player and say, you have a background of X, Y, and Z. So that naturally means that you would know these things. So I would then tell them this, but the rest of the group will not know. And then I'll sort of give them the over the top, not maybe not over the top, but I'll give them the very clear indication of something the group doesn't. This is where you have to talk to them, and then they'll go oh well, can I just tell the group that? It's yeah, but actually tell them what you want to do, and so step by step, bring them in, to the point where they understand they might know something the other won't, and so build it in from there. But it's a gradual thing, because not everyone springs out of their oyster shell, all ready to just sort of engage with the entire group, especially if it's a bunch of weirdos you've never met before. Then you've got to gel with them, and that takes time, that takes energy, and that takes investment from everyone involved.
Yeah, quite. And one thing I'm going to say with your descriptions, slightly off the topic, but how if you read an Edward Lear nonsense poem, a lot of the words aren't things you'll find in the dictionary, but it paints a picture. Playing in Saxius' sessions, there are 2 or 3 words that you use, Saxius, and you've used them a few times.
Go on.
That aren't English. That just aren't. They're completely made up words, but they paint the picture.
That's a spectacular point.
Absolutely.
And I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if you're aware if you're doing it with some of the words, because I'm aware, because obviously English is a language that you've picked up over your time being in England, but that it does paint the scene very well.
I come from at least in my family, we very often will just make up words to insert something in. So that's a normality from the family I've been raised in, where there are certain words in Danish that You just can't translate. But you will just have certain like noises that will be made, at least in my family, whereas like this, we all just accept this is a part of the sentence, and we understand what the sentence means.
Yeah.
This just emphasizes it. So
some of those still exist in the Midwest in the U.S., like in Wisconsin, where they have there's a Scandinavian influence there. There are exclamations that don't have specific meanings, but I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. But they've made it into American regional dialects. So
no, it's funny.
Which
words do I say? Like I rarely pick up on it because it's my everyday way of.
Now he's gonna be all self-conscious. Thanks, Geek.
No, I'm not gonna be self-conscious. I'm gonna do it more now.
But next time you say one of them, I will mention it.
Sure.
I gotta find the episodes of The Simpsons where they're just where they're talking about the word cromulent and stuff like that. Just making up words. Either that or that really good the ongoing sketches from In Living Color with the one guy who in prison who would just make up all the words because it's supposed to be really well read.
Yeah.
Quichibo. Yes.
Who owes who a drink?
But that's how language evolves, isn't it? And how language probably developed in the first place in a lot of cases, how words came into being.
Shakespeare invented nearly half the words we use today. So,
well, I don't know if that's true, but
there are a number of turns of phrase that are directed from Shakespeare for sure.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's half.
No.
I'm being hyperbolic. I'm just being hyperbolic.
Yeah. Well,
I've heard the statement.
English is sort of a sponge language, and when we take words and expressions from other languages and just add it to
and that's why it's the best.
I think there were 4 or 5 words that Edward Lear created for his poetry that have made it into. They're now used. Yeah. They're just now used because they worked so well. I'm not even sure if it's.
Well, a good example of nonsense words that have made it into common parlance and through D&D pretty much is Vorpal. People will talk about things being Vorpal even outside the context of D&D now, and I've heard it.
That came from Jabberwocky.
I think that came from that came from
that's what I mean. It's like there's I mean that I've loved that poem since I was a kid, and it makes perfect sense, even though most of it is gibberish.
Chortling. I think chortling is one of the words.
Chortling.
Oh yeah,
that was created.
It's a type of burbling. Because it's like burbling is one I think too. Because babbling, and a lot of them are the reason they make sense is because they're variations on words that we do use. Like burbling and babbling, and
I think babble comes from Babel. I think
it does, but I'm saying you can take that word and twist it. That's my last name. Is an example of how words change over time, and I mean, not necessarily gonna. I mean, my last name is a German variation on the name Arnold, right. And it's just because there are 2 letters in my last name that were separate and became one.
I was about to ask you the etymology on bait, as if that was your last name.
Well, that is from the Russian Bit, but.
Oh God!
I am afraid I'm gonna jump off here. It was fun talking to all of you.
Yeah, great talking to you again.
We'll chat soon.
Bye.
See you later, dude. And then there were 4.
My grandmother getting mad at me once for always wanting to answer, saying "yeah" as a kid, right? And my grandmother's German. And so I was visiting her one summer, and then her ex-husband was visiting, and he's an American, and he's like Irma, what's the German word for yes? And she's like, well, it's yeah. And he's like, well, maybe he's just answering you in German. She's like, gave him a dirty look because she was like, you're not speaking proper English. She was kind of a hard ass. Like when my dad and her immigrated over here, when my dad was 7, she used to whoop his butt if he spoke German. She's like, we're in America, we're Americans, we speak English now. Meanwhile, my dad's at school teaching all the kids German. So,
I would, that's very alien to me as an Irishman. If anything, like the first thing we do is like talk about the greatness of our culture and like cram it in people's faces and say,
yeah, you didn't survive World War II and watch your country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that
my grandmother was 17 during the bombing of Berlin.
I'm not saying otherwise, but like these are even Irish people who've survived like the famine and the Civil War and the War of Independence and forced conscription in World War I, and they still did this. So I mean,
yes, but they were probably not tired and fed up of their country. She came to America and she's like, I'm done with Germany.
Yeah, I don't know.
She's told me German fairy tales when I was a kid in German. I actually spoke German before I spoke English. Meanwhile, she's whooping my dad's butt for speaking German. I don't know what, but it was generational differences, generational trauma.
Yeah, I mean, I think she spared you because grandparents are always nicer to their grandchildren than parents are to their own children. So I don't know.
Probably, but because of post-World War survival instinct, she also could take a beautiful piece of meat and turn it into a gray blob sitting on a plate just to get all the maximum nutrients out of it.
And I think my greater point was I'm just a bit saddened whenever I hear people just kind of abandon their culture. I don't know. It's just.
Oh yeah, it sucks because like when I was in high school, I took German because I was going to be able to talk to my dad in his native tongue.
Well, that didn't last long.
So, I mean, DK, you've got that American twang to your Irish.
I know.
Because,
I watched a lot of cartoons. I watched a lot of cartoons as a kid, and I have the tism, so it just sort of stuck. And I was mocked relentlessly for it growing up.
I mean, flat out, you don't sound Irish at all.
Yeah, no,
I know.
I thought you were American.
No, it's weird. My dad grew up stateside.
You're about as Irish as every American on St. Patrick's Day.
my dad grew up stateside, moved back, and he sounds Irish, right? My mom was born in Ireland, moved back here, and she sounds Irish.
There, right? The way you said Ireland betrayed you. Ireland.
I know, dude. Okay, I watched Looney Tunes and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends when I was a kid. Okay, I was a loner. Cartoons were my friends, so I can't help that. So.
No, it's.
I know. Like I'm at this point where I'm saying, it is what it is. I've come to accept it.
Talking family histories is always fun at work.
It is.
At work, they always get the thing like, "Oh, and what is your background?" Well, I had family that fought in World War II on the wrong side.
Yeah, but it wasn't the wrong side to them at the time.
I was gonna say they didn't know that at the time.
But then, of course, that always has to launch into the massive discussion of like, not every German is a Nazi.
Yeah,
and then there's some Germans will just go again with the Nazis. Like it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, Germany. There's going to be a long time before you get that stain out. I'm sorry, you're just going to have.
It's important to remember the propaganda machine was used against Germans too, and there were a lot of middle class Germans for whom life was good. Like they were hearing about all the crap going on, and they were isolated and sheltered from the war, and so they only knew what they were told through the propaganda machine. It's actually pretty interesting.
But the other thing that doesn't get talked about is that the Germans actually had their own resistance against Germany. You hear about the French resistance and all these other countries having resistances. There were Germans out
who knew the truth and were like, "This is horrible." Yeah,
this is horrific.
My great uncle was one of those guys, although he was also a criminal before the war. But he was sort of a bootlegger and stuff before the war in post-World War I environments, and then during the war he became a resistance fighter, and then after the war he went back to bootlegging. So
this topic it's kind of depressing, to be honest.
I mean, my interesting family stories are not on that sort of scale, but there's a few interesting skeletons that emerged, and it's the things we've learned about our family, families as time has gone on, and as things that have been shoveled under the rug, sort of crept out because tongues loosen as people get older. and they start to lose marbles.
They're regretting. Or they
Yeah.
regret
I
all the
know.
stuff that happened.
One of it was my grandmother. She lost a bit of her faculties in the late 80s. She lived until 91, 92, so she had a good innings.
Right.
But she was at a Sunday having Sunday dinner with her nephews. Well, people who'd been brought up as her nephews and nieces. And we were talking. I wasn't there, so they were all chatting away because her sister, her younger sister, Tess, had recently passed away, and Tess was their mother. And they started talking, like, oh, blah blah blah, yeah, and of course, Tess was your younger sister, and my nan, without even thinking, went, "Oh no, Tess was my niece." And Tess's kids, who by now were in their 50s, who all their lives had been brought up thinking a family was constructed in a certain way, it all came revealed that Tess was actually their niece, and Tess's oldest sister was actually their grandmother, and who they thought had been their grandmother when they were growing up wasn't actually their grandmother, was their great-grandmother. And this was a bit of a family reveal that just sort of slipped out.
Something similar that happened to me and happened to my friend in his 30s. Not to me, but my friend. He's like, he found out that his cousin was actually his sister. Like it's like dad had a dalliance with somebody. You know,
these things happen. You know,
my father's father had a dalliance as well, and my father found out he'd got a sister.
I do like the word dalliance. It's such a fun way to, it's such a
poetic
way to say explaining infidelity or whatever.
Philandering. But I have a half brother because your old dad was a philanderer. So.
My brother and I have different dads just because our mother decided to have kids with the only two men that actually had any genetic merit in her life, and then went on to the types of men that she actually enjoyed the company of. So, like my brother and I were like, we're genetically engineered. He's like, why? He's like, because if you think about it, both of our dads are the only ones mom's ever been with who were worth a damn. You know, it's like, and if you look at it, they're like all a bunch of like country western singers and like, you know, roughnecks and stuff like that. And his dad's a professor, and
you're a super soldier. Your mom's playing the long game, my dude. She's playing the long game.
Yeah, family histories are weird. Like my dad only made it to this country because my grandmother's sister and her husband wanted free babysitters when they moved from Germany. They wanted to take my great grandmother with them, and she put her foot down. She's like, not without your sister and her son. Otherwise, I stay here in Germany. But so my grandmother's sister, I don't know what that makes her, great aunt, whatever. She had married a man who, before the war, was making tons of money by basically, you know, raking it in after post-World War I construction. Then during the war, he was raking it in through selling war munitions and you know, construction contracts for the Nazis and all that. And then after the war, he was starting to rake it in by basically bilking everybody for the reconstruction of Germany. And when they made it plenty of money, he's like, let's move to America and be socialites.
Right.
And so they want to take great grandma with them to be the babysitter.
I'm going to divert us now, as is my way.
Okay.
Because people are discussing the concept of technology in RPGs, in fantasy RPGs.
Yeah, someone brought that up earlier.
Let's try and have a productive last 30 or 40 minutes of the stream. Technology in D&D.
I am okay with it.
Thing that exists
in world, or in like the use of technological tools.
Now, not to be pedantic, what do we mean by tech? Like, how far are we going with this? Like, advanced weaponry, gunpowder, magitech, electricity. Okay. How far are we?
You've got like a default generic D&D world.
Right.
How do you react when somebody says they want to use guns? Assuming
Depends on the
it's a
setting.
standard.
I roll up a newspaper, bat him on the nose, and go, no.
If it's not
No.
part of the world, if it's not part of the world I've set up, then no.
Yeah. If someone is like, say, I'm going to play a Dark Ages style world, and someone says, I want a flintlock pistol, no. Just get the squirter. It's like, no, bad
Now,
kitty.
if somebody's playing a wizard and they want to invent gunpowder through alchemy,
maybe.
I could swing that. If they really want to go through the logical steps to make a gun, I probably wouldn't disallow it. It's just not going to be easy.
My thing when it comes to technology in D&D is we're basing it on what knowledge we have now. So where does it end? Where does it end? Where do they stop pushing for technological advancements?
Well, here's the other thing. I'd also like to point out to them. Okay, you want to make guns. How do you justify your character in world coming because the gun took a long time to be invented after the inception of gunpowder. It took at least 1,000 years. So what you'd have to tell me is you want to have basically flintlock pistol technology that took centuries to quote perfect to the point where it is the way
he wants a flintlock. What if your player's just saying he wants a hand cannon? It's a tube with a fuse.
Well, I mean, even that, but the thing is, like, the Chinese invented gunpowder for the purposes of fireworks, and they didn't use it for warfare. It wasn't until the Europeans started doing it. Like, Vlad Tepes was one of the first people to implement gunpowder in battle,
and that was like entirely true.
I mean,
they had used it in war. They just didn't use it for guns.
Okay, they used it cannons. They used it for
They made rockets for signaling. They actually had a thing called fire lances, which was a thing.
All right, okay, I forgot about the fire lance, but yeah, like in the sense of guns. But the point I'm driving at is you're basically going down several chains of innovation to get to the thing you want. How would your character even begin to conceptualize this?
How does your character conceptualize a dragon?
Well, they've seen a dragon, but they've never seen gunpowder before. If they saw like a type of crystal explode or its powder is flammable, I'd be like, can we stabilize this like gunpowder in our world? I'm like, okay, sure, that's possible.
So I'm going to take you down a line of logic here. First of all, it depends on the player or the character, I should say, not the player.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Is the thief going to be the guy who thinks of it? No. The wizard,
probably not.
And I'm going to call you back to the original rules for Fireball. It talks all about how fire goes down and narrows and follows out to a certain volume. So your wizard who knows Fireball is likely going to have an understanding of like thermodynamics and physics and energy and stuff like that. So if the player character comes up and says, my wizard is going to try and find a way to synthetically produce Fireball that's not magic. Okay, we're on the roll. The basic principles of directing that down a tube is in the Fireball spell.
Yeah.
So
fair enough.
If a wizard player came up to me and said, "Okay, I'd like to get a long metal tube, and I'd like to cast Fireball, and direct it with this long metal tube, essentially making a form of flamethrower," I'd find that quite amusing because he's using his Fireball spell. He's got that third level spell that he's learned, and he'll only get to use it once a day. Typically,
I mean, you could just use that to reskin the Wand of Fire, right?
Yeah,
that is true.
It's the equivalent thing, only it's technologically based instead of enchanted.
Yeah, I mean, stinking cloud spell could be a pot full of chemicals too. I mean, and that's of course that's the other step in the development of gunpowder that before guns there were bombs and there were grenades.
Now, I mean, even Greek fire, even comes back to like the tube thing with the Fireball example, like you said. Greek fire is fairly old.
People knew how nozzles worked. So gunpowder is just a matter of making a strong enough nozzle to channel what you're doing. They knew that things could project things because as soon as they had the crossbow.
Crossbow tech isn't that old,
For me, the verisimilitude with a certain time period is important in the game. I'm the sort of DM who will go through a list of arms and armor and cross out the ones that aren't applicable to an era.
DK, did you say crossbow isn't that old?
No, it's not that young. My apologies. I mean, it's fairly old technology. It's fairly old technology.
There's a or a gas.
The Greeks, I know. Yeah, the Greeks and the Romans had them. They were called belly bows. Yeah, I just fucked up. That was a misspeak on my part. Sorry. Yeah, no. Crossbow is fairly old tech. The Chinese and the Romans had them.
So my default time period for a D&D game is around 1400 AD. Now,
also late medieval period, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it wasn't till the late part of that century that any form of hand firearms began creeping onto battlefields in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and even then, they were only effective when you put about 100 of them in a line. And they all fired
with pikemen, and they had pikemen to protect them.
They predate pike blocks, actually, the hand cannons.
But they had to do that because they were so inaccurate.
Yeah.
Yep. So what they did is they just created this wall of fire by just all of them firing at the same time and just aiming in the general direction of the enemy. So
that's when players want to have guns in fantasy. So like even when I'm proposing a setting with guns, I will have players to kind of flip it around. Let's say I'm wanting to do like an Age of Sail game, right? And I decide that I want to have pistols and have some, have the early firearms, not like late end rifled muskets. Or
and there was a green book in AD&D for that, wasn't there? In second edition.
There's always a player who's like, "Oh no, that's just going to change the game too much." I'm like, no. Guns are fundamentally slower than any other missile weapon, except for maybe a heavy crossbow.
But here's the other side of it. Like I think,
the thing is, though, hold on.
Okay, go for it.
Guns require a much more specific skill set than bows, slings, even the crossbow.
Oh yeah.
So, yes, they're in the world, especially in an Age of Sail campaign. All right, how well are you? What happens when you jump overboard? Now all your powder's wet.
You're fucked.
Because it's not the be all end all that a lot of people think it is. There's a big difference between allowing flintlocks and allowing an M16.
Yeah, I was about to say. See, I think that's kind of the main problem I have with it, because a lot of players will, well, not a lot. Again, I'm generalizing. That's not fair. There are some players who will use the "I want guns" as an excuse to break the game. They want the look of like a steampunk style flintlock that fires like a modern handgun, and that's where I have a problem with it. They want all the power of modern firearms in just a steampunk aesthetic, and I don't like that.
And it all comes down to how you handle it. Because okay, cool,
yeah,
I'll allow it. Now, just like crafting any custom, let's say I allow it. Just like crafting any magic item, you have to go through 8 million hoops to get there. And what happens when it breaks? Or that dragon breath makes you save on your items, and
Mm-hmm.
Now here's an interesting one, because if a fighter character goes on to build his castle in the 1400s sort of typical setting, they had cannons in that time. Castles had cannons.
They were called bombards,
and they were castle defenses more than anything. I would allow that. The gunpowder existed in that sense. It wasn't a one-on-one weapon. It was a defensive weapon that'd be mounted on a castle and just aimed into the mass of soldiers who were besieging the castle. And I think it'd be really interesting because obviously, if you're casting a spell on a cannonball, whoever you hit has got to survive the cannonball hitting them first anyway, if it's a touch spell.
Yeah.
One real good argument that I used actually to dissuade somebody from wanting to have gunpowder / guns in the world is I'm like, okay, consider for a moment how many monsters and spells in D&D hit you with fire. Is this where you want to be when you have a bunch of cartridges on you?
Yeah, like your gunpowder is down the
save versus fireball. If you even save and take half damage, now you're going to take all of that exploding, or at least cooking off.
And there's a chance the gunpowder in the barrel of the gun from that fireball explosion is going to blow up. And even if you survive the bandolier of explosions, your gun's going to get sundered.
You're not going to have a bandolier of explosions without compression. It's just going to flare up on you.
Oh yeah. But I'm saying it's going to But even if say those save and you don't take, the gun's probably going to get sundered. It's going to explode, and then your gun's done.
Well, it probably not. Well, actually, with simple firearms, it's probably just going to fire off.
Oh yeah, you could actually hit an ally with that
in a different way, because assuming the material survives the fire,
which is unlikely.
Early editions would have had you making item saves for everything you're packing and stuff too, probably. Right?
Yep.
But assuming the gun survives, but you have powder in there and ready to go, it's gonna fire off. Which means you're just gonna have a random rifle shot or pistol shot go off.
All I'm gonna say is you better hope your allies aren't in front of you when that happens, because they're not gonna be too happy when you shoot them in the back.
And if your pack mule carrying your backup supply of gunpowder in the cask gets hit, I'll just go away real quick.
No. Yeah. Okay. And there's actually even funnier than that. If it explodes, the party's deafened, so anything that's sneaking up on them will probably automatically succeed. And 2, that's wandering monster checks. Because if you explode a massive explosion like that, a detonation in a contained environment like a dungeon, I'd say probably it'd be heard from a level below. Everyone in the level you're on at least will have heard it. Everyone. So that's fun.
I do occasionally like to engage in some weird fantasy where you do have Expedition of the Barrier Peak stuff, but that's an exception. It has to be part of the campaign.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about including laser tech, but I suppose we already have blasting ones.
Again, laser tech. So here's the deal, though. Having gone through the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, you're lucky if you make it out of figuring out how to use that laser pistol without losing a hand, because it can blow up in your hand.
That's very true.
Well, you don't have to like it, but we're talking about this. It's on topic, man. But
you're the one who wanted to talk about technology in the game.
But the other thing is,
that's true.
That laser pistol was really awesome for as long as you had power packs for it.
Yes.
Well, those are charges.
And unlike a wand that might get recharged through magical means down the road, if a player says, "Hey, I want to find a wizard to maybe recharge my wand of fireballs," I'd be like, "Okay, you can do it." Because there's magic that made the thing in the first place. You can at least extrapolate that there's probably magic to recharge the wand.
The wands are specifically rechargeable in some cases.
However,
but
you're gonna be much harder pressed to say, yeah, you can find a wizard who can figure out how to make an E-clip for your laser pistol.
I cast lightning bolt at it.
And now you tried the internal workings of your laser pistol because it's not designed to be.
No, it charged it. Look at what Thor did to Iron Man. It charged it.
If you want to research the spell Melf's magnificent charging cable, you can do that.
Sure. Go find an illithid who doesn't want to suck your brain out, and then maybe they might teach you. Yeah,
that might be a great but they deal in biotech, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you might find one, but it's all a matter of whether you make it out of the Underdark alive.
But the whole point is we came out of Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. One of us had a suit of power armor.
Sweet.
Which is really great until you run out of power and you're wearing it. And you're like, I can't.
Oh, you can't even take it off.
Well, you can. You can take it off. Somebody else has to take it off because it's not working anymore. But again, they had that whole tech tree in there for figuring out how the stuff worked. And some of those results were very catastrophic. you're very. I mean, there's none of that with magic with wands of fireballs and stuff. Like there's no flowchart saying results in a catastrophic explosion or anything like that.
Unless you combine them in the wrong way, but those are edge cases. But
well, yeah, and that's more like potions and stuff. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Straw Piglet brings up, with extra planet travel and teleport. I mean, you could potentially do that. I mean,
yeah,
potentially, especially if you consider the default settings for both Greenwood's Forgotten Realms and Gygax's Greyhawk and Arnezen's Blackmoor. They all tied into Earth.
Geek, I'm going to assume that you're not going to allow cannons in the game that you're running.
If you get to the levels where you can have an army and a keep, then go on. Yeah.
Okay.
But you've got to get to those name levels to do that.
Right.
And
That's
it's a long old haul.
All right. Take a halfling. They get to name level at 8. So you.
I mean, now that said, I've come up with ways to do firearms that are fantasy specific. I have in my campaign world, there's a weapon called a Dwarven Runelock that looks like a gun, but it fires basically a solid iron crossbow bolt or a steel crossbow bolt, and it has a hammer, but on that hammer is scribed a rune of thunder. So when the hammer clicks, it produces a thunder effect that projects the bolt out of the barrel. It's a magic item that works like a gun. And exists in a very narrow, but it's still a magic item. So
that's fair. Yeah. That's a way to handle it,
A friend of mine wanted a compound bow in D&D, and so he's like, because he was like, compound bows are cool, right? With the cable, with the pulleys and stuff. I'm like,
pulley, yeah.
I'm like, okay. And so he found some sage to work out the math, and now his character's walking around with a compound bow.
Is it tensed to his strength?
Probably, because back then we played with bows built for strength, so that's old AD&D stuff.
Yeah. I basically, whether or not it's historically accurate, I don't go for accuracy in that regard, but
go for verisimilitude.
Yeah, and well, in AD&D you have the longbow and shortbow. You have the composite long and composite short.
Yeah.
Treat the composite bows as the ones that can be tensed to strength.
Yeah,
a lot of people did that. The
only time I'd ever allow strength bonuses to ranged damage or ranged attacks would be for handheld things with a fire rate of 1, like javelins, hand axes, warhammers.
So I'm just saying this one.
What's so funny?
One-shot nuke artillery, yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. Why not? I mean,
we use sovereign glue to put all the gems into a necklace, Mr.
Kaboom!
Oh God, that's horrible. He had to use it both strong. Only he. Yeah, he did. Oh no! He was only strong enough that he could string it. I think that was the problem. They weren't strong enough to string it, but he could.
No, in the story they couldn't pull it.
Nobody could. Only Odysseus could string it and
I thought
draw it.
I thought it was. Oh yeah, to string it and draw. Right. Okay. It's been a while since I've read the Odyssey. I don't remember.
There's Thor as well with Mjolnir.
That's got an enchantment on it though.
No, I don't. No. In the original myths, it wasn't an enchantment. It was just so goddamn.
It's the belt he wears, actually. I think that gives him the ability to do it in the myths.
Yes.
No. I think that just makes him even stronger than he already is. He doesn't get the belt until after he gets the hammer, I think.
He can only wield the hammer because of the belt. But there's one person. There's one person in the myth in Norse mythology. There's one individual in deities and demigods capable of lifting that hammer without the belt.
His son.
His son. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Which is weird.
Not really. I mean, I could give you some PSB for that. Some pseudoscientific bullshit. PSB. But basically, after wearing the belt long enough in his life, the magic of the belt transferred to Thor's body to a degree where it was able to pass into his offspring.
Okay, that's fair.
I'll take it. It's all bullshit
PSP.
anyway, but
It's pure PSP.
So the magic of the magic of the belt lived on in Thor's knackers then.
In Thor's knackers.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it was just above his crotch, so I mean that does track.
Yep.
Kabuki Kid's talking about weapon specialization for bow in First Ed, the way it breaks the game, and I agree. That's why I like to stagger specialization in First Ed. So
I would just
you can't get it until 4th level to begin with, and then if you're doing a bow, you have to wait because it's 2 slots. You have to wait to 7th before you're finally specialist of the bow.
That makes sense.
I prefer the method of. I prefer the method of just making sure only melee weapons can be specialized in. I find it's just a lot less of a headache.
It's a fair ruling. I like having them there, but I just make them rare. They're harder to achieve. You have to find somebody to teach you, and it's usually expensive and rare. I think the power of bow specialization in first edition.
My agency, I want.
But my agency,
too bad.
You have the agency to get it. You got to go find it.
Yeah.
But
go
if you have somebody else,
go in those hills over yonder where all those cannibals are. Knock yourself out.
But my backstory says I can have it.
Yeah,
I don't care. Backstories
when
are
you hit
cringe.
7th level.
No, backstories are cringe. You should be making your character evolve through gameplay, not from stuff that hasn't happened at the table.
Backstory, as long as it actually doesn't take the place of your actual story.
Yes. A little bit of. I always tell people a paragraph at most.
I mean, if you want to write 3 pages of backstory, that's cool.
But keep that to yourself.
If that helps you play your character.
Yeah,
keep it to yourself.
Grounded, that's awesome.
There's a general reverse proportion to the length of survival of a character and the length of their backstory. The longer the backstory, the more time they spent on it, the quicker they will die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine.
It's funny is I made a backstory for my wizard character that I had to back out of playing for my brother's game, and it wasn't a huge backstory. It's about three paragraphs. I tend to do it like a 3-paragraph at most for and it's usually like where they came from, what they became, and where they are now before they start. That's kind of my framework. And the 3rd paragraph usually sets up their reason for adventuring. Anyways, it wasn't made to be anything huge and stellar, but my brother, who's the DM, seemed to want to engage my backstory like right away. I'm like, you don't have to. The backstory is just written there to tell me and you who my character is, and then give him a reason for getting out into the world. We don't have to.
But if you kept it short and simple, then there's more chance your DM will be interested in what you've got to say in it.
Yeah, I mean the only real mystery in his backstory is like his the wizard, because I made it. He's first level character. I made it like, why is a first level wizard out there? He was the apprentice to a wizard. The wizard went off on an adventure and never returned.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of sitting there in the tower going, hello. Is it
Master.
time for me to go out into the world yet, Master? I guess I'll go out and see what's going on, and
Master.
But I and of course I don't do tragic backstories anymore. I'm on a personal crusade to never write another tragic backstory for a character ever again. But because they're always. I mean, in fact I try to do the reverse. I try to write relatively happy backstories.
Yeah, just like here's the backstory for you. I was a farmer. My parents didn't have enough money to feed me, so I had to get a job, and now I'm adventuring. Yeah. Simple as. That's a fairly easy backstory to do. Oh, I'm a wizard, and I have debts to pay. I have student loans to pay off. I'm a thief, and the Thieves Guild want my head. I'm a cleric on crusade. There you go. Simple. I just came up with these off the top of my head.
One of my most recent ones was I I was brought up in poverty, and I learnt my magic to con people using basic tricks in the street. I conned an innocent guard out of his earnings, and he reacted badly to it. Went and got himself maimed, trying to earn the money back. Now I'm adventuring to try and pay back his wife because he now can't support her. There you go.
Yeah, the last thief character I wrote up, his backstory was he was one of several for a large urban family, and so he kind of took to hanging around town and getting to know the people in the village, and fell in with the local Goblin Thieves Guild, and they realized that it was cool to have a human who could pass in the community, and started teaching him how to do the shtick, and that's how he got his abilities.
It's just keep it simple, keep it short, keep it simple. Give it a read. Give it a
kiss. Keep it simple, sweetheart.
Yeah, but to be honest, I prefer games without backstories. I like backstories to emerge through playing.
Yeah.
Like, it also depends on the game that you're playing. Like in the Greek game that I play, and you have to like do a questionnaire to like explain like your family history, the kind of parent you might have, the kind of enemies you might make. Like that's important for that, but most of it is just like, what stuff do you like, or how do you react to this? It's very simplistic stuff, but I
think the key is that backstories are not necessarily bad. It is the presentation of the backstory that's usually the problem. No, I mean, you can have a huge idea for where your character came from in your brain. That's fine. It doesn't need to be written out, and it doesn't have to be foisted onto your DM. Like
that's the other key thing.
Yeah, I mean, I have my noble swordsman character, which is the previous character I got to play. The short version of his backstory is he's a noble who is out in the world trying to make fame and fortune for himself, because he's never going to inherit anything, because he's like the youngest of four.
Your brother was the heir and you were the spare, basically.
And then there's a longer version of that explains like some of his cool stuff, but that was for me and not the GM.
If you want to write 20
I have
pages,
my elevator pitch, and then I have my actual backstory.
If you want to write 20 pages for yourself, that's fine, but just give me 3 sentences. Just give me 3 key sentences from it that I can use.
I love my Call of Cthulhu players. Like they were really quick and concise. Like my wife's like, she grew up in money. She was a nurse during the war, and after the war, she picked up the family business, which was basically being a psychic.
There you go.
And then another guy's like, him and his brother went over there, came back. His brother was wrecked. He's now a reporter trying to figure out the truth behind what wrecked his brother, because he saw something, and then
something
the other
his
guy
mind could not comprehend.
Yep. And then the other player, one of my other players, my nephew, who came into the campaign later, he's like, he's an aspiring adventure writer who figured he needed to get some actual adventure under his belt to make it legit. Here's one I liked for Call of Cthulhu. My players, when they ran through the Horror on the Orient Express intro sort of adventure, the 1890s one, had no backstories whatsoever. They just had characters that they played through, and they only one of them got away unscathed. One of them got this one particular player. His character got driven insane and was badly scarred. Then when we started the 1920s one, he created his original character's nephew, who wanted to find out what had happened to his uncle, because he loved hearing his stories when he was younger. That was his backstory. But it made me, when they went into the Dreamlands in one section, I put his uncle in the Dreamlands.
Ah, boy.
So, and I just added it in there. It wasn't in the adventure. I just added it in there. It was an opportunity. And the player thought that was great. Thought it was really, really good. to see his old character sort of come back and be all scarred and mutilated and mad. And
yeah, I actually like it. I actually like it when DMs because when Aaron when he was running his OSC game and he was going to use for basically he's going to take aspects from his OSC game to his 5e game. He basically said, I'm going to use the old characters like my cleric Sir Michael and make him like the head patriarch of the Church of St. Cuthbert. And I was like, yay! My character has longevity. I'm so happy. I love it when DMs do that stuff, or like these little cameos, that it basically means your characters matter beyond the game.
Yeah. It doesn't need to be some massive epic. It just
there.
A little mention, a little acknowledgement is fine.
Yeah. And it just means he's kind of eternal. And I like that.
So Chaosium put out some free Call of Cthulhu stuff this week. I didn't know about that.
Oh, did they? Nice. That was nice of them.
I've mentioned it. So I'll have to pop over and to their site after this stream and see what I can raid from there.
Satiate your Call of Cthulhu addiction.
The problem is I've got half a shelf of unused Call of Cthulhu stuff that would take about 5 or 6 years to play through as it is.
Well, it doesn't hurt to grab the free stuff. It doesn't cost you anything. You never know what you find.
Exactly.
And you can always adapt it for something else.
Yeah.
It's just this was a good stream.
Chaosium and short stuff that's short stuff that supplements this one. Where is it?
That's an interesting shirt you have on there, John. What is that?
It looks like a Merileth.
It's a Tool shirt.
Tool, okay.
It's Tool.
I've never heard of Tool.
Haven't you?
No.
Remember how young he is.
Yes.
Do you like heavy music?
My youngest boyfriend is a huge Tool fan.
I like metal. I like metal music, yeah, but I don't know if I've listened to enough heavy metal to say I like it or not.
Tool's
but I'm not opposed.
Tool is prog metal.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah, I like
low end of metal.
Yeah,
some of it's heavy. Some of it's very heavy.
Crunchy,
I
but
listen
not
to
necessarily heavy.
Yeah, I listen to melodic death metal, so that sounds kind of up my alley. So yeah, let's check them out.
Nameless
Tool
Horrors.
is nowhere near the same category as death metal.
Oh no,
probably.
No, melodic death metal.
It's still a category of death metal, man.
And yes, Kabuki Kid, they are incredibly good live. They are such technically gifted,
competent.
Yeah. Especially the drummer. The drummer is.
Yeah.
He has been described as being the best living rock drummer, because of course Neil Peart and John Bonham and people like that are no longer with us. So he's extremely good. But they're odd. Tool are odd. They are a bit of an acquired taste.
I will have to listen to them and see if I acquire that taste.
No.
If I'm going to give you a song to start you off on Tool, I'm going to say start by listening to The Pot.
The Pot.
It's probably their most accessible song.
Okay.
And if you find that inaccessible, then you're not going to like any of the other stuff. But The Pot it's one of their shorter songs, and it's one of the more accessible ones for non-fans.
Newbies. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I'll have to check them out. But I don't care about the length of songs, to be honest. Like I listen to Dream Theater, and they regularly put out albums with like their last song is like 22 to 24 minutes long. So I'm good.
There's, I think, Tool's last album, the main 6 songs on it averaged out at 13 to 14 minutes each.
Nice.
So there you go.
Yeah.
They're not something you you
just
take
pop
it
on
lightly.
and just listen.
No.
Yeah. That's fair.
Ian, I've got this shirt at the gig. I saw them last year, about a year ago now, and it was painful. £35 for a t-shirt.
Wow, that pounds. That's probably $60 in Canadian money.
Yikes!
Yeah.
I just ordered a T-shirt for my kid the other day, and it cost me $36 after shipping, and I thought that was bad.
Fuck.
T-shirts are not cheap these days. It's crazy.
No.
Yeah, they really aren't, are they?
And if they are, they suck. So
yeah.
I can't say this one's a good one. It's nice and thick, and it hasn't lost any shape or any fade or anything. So
yeah,
that's good. That's something.
For 35 pounds, it's better.
Exactly.
I mean, it's fairly heavy. I mean, it's heavy enough. Like, I mean, come on, it's 35 pounds.
Will it deflect a light caliber bullet?
Again, is it better?
Probably. If it's made of wool, probably.
I don't know what kind of sheep you've met, but
it was £65.
Dude, if they have to run away from the Welsh, I mean, they're pretty strong sheep.
Well, we're talking bullets versus other projectiles, but
I mean, the concert ticket itself cost £65, and it was the one. It was right at the back, miles away from the stage.
So you can barely hear anything they're saying.
It's interesting. Folks are talking about different, they're like subject of armor, obviously, because we're talking about bulletproof wool. Yeah. But I learned of a very odd low-tech armor today that would be perfect for Dark Sun, but it came up because I've been watching a bunch of practical archaeology for Native Americans, and I didn't know this was a thing. But evidently the Plains nations made armor by taking hide and adhering sand to it. They would take layers of glue and sand to create basically an artificial asphalt on the outside of hide, and it can turn metal arrowheads, and even actually a spear will only go like half an inch through it.
That's clever.
I mean, I heard that the South.
Well, considering
the South
trees are a rarity out there.
I mean, like I heard like the Aztecs, like the Mesoamerican tribes, actually, like the Jackal warriors took their equivalent of gambeson, like this padding, soaked it in water. Yeah, cotton. Soaked it in water to make it thicker, so like they deflect cuts better, projectiles, and blunt attacks. It's
also a way to not overheat when you're wearing armor in the Mexican sun, because it's the same idea. It's the same principle behind the pith helmet. The pith helmet is actually, if it's made of cork, you soak it in water and it radiates heat. So.
DK, you wondered if I could hear from where I was in my seat at the gig. I'll give you an idea of how loud it was. When the first bass note was played, my seat shook.
Okay. All right.
That's
that answers
how
that
loud
question.
It was. Yeah.
That answers that question. Well, I'm glad you weren't sitting right up on top of it, because your head might have exploded.
My seat, I was in a seat at the top, and the seat shook.
To address Kabuki's comment, oh wow, that sounds heavy. The advantage is that it's heavier at the start of the fight when you're fresh, and lightens up as you fight, and the water evaporates off the cotton.
Yeah, that's actually very useful, because as you get tired, you don't want to be
it becomes less protective, but you're also not as much in the thick of
tired.
battle.
Yeah, because by that point you're mopping up the enemies or you're retreating, and you're probably tired as well, so you don't want heavy freaking armor anyway. So
yeah,
because there were Celts who didn't wear anything at all in combat.
There's actually kind of debate over whether that's true. Like, it did happen on occasion, but that was really more what the Picts did. That these were like the accounts of what Caesar had seen, and this was a handful of times.
Yeah, there's also some
streakers.
There's a suggestion that there were actually small warrior cults amongst the Gauls that went out naked.
You also have to remember that, like, Gaul is not like it's not the most especially like back then where it was all trees. Like it was a fairly cold place to live. Like it's like they said the same thing of the Irish.
That's a
like
pretty broad stroke, considering Gaul was a gigantic chunk of the European continent.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, like generally speaking, like at least half of it was like not exactly that warm. Like it wasn't like freezing.
It was mostly France.
That's
France and parts of Germany.
Yeah.
Although they're now finding out as they research it more that some of the tribes they thought were Gauls were Germans, and some of the other tribes they thought were Germans were Gauls. And the distinction may not have been as clear as they thought it was to begin with. So.
No, but no, it's like they'd also make that same assertion on the Irish as well, where but again, look at Ireland. It's bogland and it rains all the time. Are you going to tell me that the Irish people didn't think, hang on, when we get really cold and it gets really wet, we get hypothermia and we die?
Yet it doesn't stop the Scots from wearing kilts.
Yeah, but again, a kilt, okay, there's a difference between wearing a kilt that at least somewhat protects you from the cold and wearing nothing.
I know. I've worn kilts before, like real full kilts, summer and winter. I used to, when I did historical reenactment, I was in a Scots Guard. I used to pack around a musket and a locker axe, or a targe and a brace of pistols and a basket hilt and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, I'm just saying that
Highland charges with live powder charges, but no rounds. That was fun too.
Yeah, I'm just saying it did happen on occasion. It just wasn't like they always did this, because like okay, wearing armor is good at keeping the arrows out of your body. Having a shield is good and all, but
shields
sometimes
are actually better at that than armor in a lot of cases.
But having a shield versus having a shield and armor, I think I'm going to go with both. But that's just me.
But you know why most people didn't have armor? Because it's expensive and most people can't afford it.
Well, yeah, I mean, they would just wear gambeson or cloth armor or something. It's better than nothing. Plus, it also keeps you warm.
Gambeson is more of a medieval thing.
Actually, well, yeah, probably. Well, I mean, we've no surviving examples because it was cotton and they all rotted away if they did exist. So,
yeah. Well,
one thing D&D doesn't do well is the price of armor.
One thing D&D doesn't do well is the accuracy of armor.
The realism,
because cloth gambeson can actually turn away arrowheads in some cases.
Yeah. It's actually a lot better than people think it is.
Padded armor should be a shit ton better than it is. And chainmail without a gambeson under it is
and for the
love
and for the love of God, stop calling brigandine armor studded leather. It's not. It's plates with cloth over it, for the love of God.
They haven't been calling brigandine studded leather since 2nd edition when they released the rules for brigandine.
That's true.
Still have
studded leather is a myth.
Yeah,
but it is a fantasy because there's not a lot of instances of actual leather armor being used either. But
probably.
At least in Europe.
That's what I say whenever somebody, in the game, they'll bring up, well, this armor doesn't really exist. I'm like, yeah, on Earth, but we're not on Earth, so carry on.
Actually, the same practical archaeologist guy I was watching did a really cool demonstration of a sheet of scale armor using rawhide scales that he made. It was really good at turning weapons. Again, everything except for an upward stroke, it would turn away spear jabs for both metal and antler tips, because he's doing Native American tech, so he's using he'll test with metal because they did have metal, even though a lot of people will try and convince you that they didn't have any kind of metal working, but they just didn't have enough to make plate mail, but or the technology to make plate mail. But the rawhide, the layered rawhide actually was really good against totally impervious against cuts and downward stabs and arrow shots with both metal tips and antler tips. The metal would go through, but not far enough to where you would
do damage.
You would be worried.
It would cut. Yeah, but you'd get a bit of bruising probably.
No, you'd get cut. It would go through like 1/8 of an inch, or 1/4 of an inch, but that's not deep enough to hurt you. It's deep enough to give you a scratch and maybe
and
give
annoy
you an infection. But of course, I come from the Pacific Northwest, where the natives there actually decided to make full suits of armor out of wood with helmets and everything too. So they had wood slat armor and stuff. Found out some really cool bits of technology too with the northeastern native armor. They actually would wear these back shields, and it provides a really awkward concept to the guy wearing it. But when you line a bunch of guys up, it forms crenellations for the rank behind them. So it's thought that the back shield was actually to protect the next rank back, so they could use their missile weapons and still have protection. And actually gave you the added bonus of not letting you get hit, about keeping you from getting hit in the head with rocks and stuff from the ranks behind you.
Yeah,
Mage, you're an OSE stalwart. I'm thinking of adding in the armor types from Rules Cyclopedia, as in scale mail and splint or banded mail.
Right. They also came out in Companion. OSE has a magazine called Carcass Crawler that has all of that catered to OSE specifically. Yeah. I don't think it's much different, but I can send you the PDF.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's worth doing. I mean, I like having those a couple of extra little armors in there just for a bit of choice.
Actually, since we're about to wrap this up about the game, Geek, are there any restrictions on what classes we can play?
I'm using the advanced rules for character classes, and you can pick any of it. There's no multi-classing. That optional one is out.
Okay, that's fair.
Level limits are in place, so the human bonuses don't exist. So, but apart from that, just go with.
Well, are we doing racist class or what?
No, we're doing the.
Okay, so
it's sort of the semi AD&D adaptation that's in the advanced book.
Yeah, I haven't read through like the advanced
classes, but no multi-classing.
No multi-classing. No.
Race class split. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can have
cool.
And yes, I will allow dwarven clerics.
Yay!
That's it. You just lost mages completely. He's just like, nope.
That's a line too far. That's a bridge too far there, John.
It's because
what about gnomes?
They're allowed. It's because the main god in the world, it's going to be this part of the world is monotheistic, and they all worship a particular god who is full of beard, is red of coat, and is the god of gifts and beards and being jolly.
I forgot this was Christmas. This is the Christmas thing. I forgot. Yeah, that's what you had me as the druid with the gnomes. I forgot about this.
Nightmare Before Christmas,
I have to play it.
Describing Santa Claus to the crowd.
If
Sandy Claus.
If I get to roll up a paladin, I will absolutely be a paladin of present giving. I have to now.
Perfect.
I have to do it.
Perfect. Paladins in OSE Advanced only need a 9 charisma, so they're pretty easy to play.
Yeah, but it's 3d6 down the line. It's not guaranteed. So
yeah, but a 9 is still fairly attainable.
A 9 is like an average roll, dude.
Yeah, but remember, we're using Avray. Avray hates you. She is an evil little witch who despises the grunt. Yeah, so that's why I said
I'm still convinced that Roll20's dice algorithm.
No, use Roll'em. Use Roll'em. I'm serious. Roll'em is.
I'm not gonna start dealing with all sorts of peripherals and stuff. I'm still gonna use it because it's right there. But not to mention playing Call of Cthulhu on Roll20 is really nice.
I'm recommending this to Geek in case he doesn't know. In case he doesn't want to use like Roll20 as well as Discord. I'm just giving him the option.
What are you saying, Elf?
Oh, I wasn't saying anything. I was saying Roll20 is Call of Cthulhu is really good on Roll20 actually.
It's the character sheet's written nice and interactive, isn't it?
Well, that and you just click on like the purple die and it rolls with a bonus die. You click on the 2 purple dies, it rolls with 2. Well, actually, any roll you do, it actually just gives you the brackets for each level of success. So you can easily just wing it, super easy.
But yeah, if you want to use the Discord server dice app to roll characters ahead of time, you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. It's just, that Saturday session I've got penciled in it's just like a drop in and chat, and I just want to sort a few things out and make sure everyone's got 3 or 4 characters. Your first party is going to be a party of good guys, though your backup characters don't have to be. I just want you to start off as good guys, being helpful.
Okay, cool.
No promises.
Oh, a question. Actually, this was a question I wanted to know. Assassins, do they have sneak attack? Because I was reading through the thing and I didn't actually see it. It just said that they instantly kill if they fail a save. I assume they don't.
I haven't read the assassin class well enough.
I would take a look because all it says is that they get their +4 to hit when striking from behind against an unaware opponent. But it just says the target must fail a save. If they have like 4 + 1 or lower hit die, they fail a save, they instantly die. Or
you'd use the surprise metric. I'm pretty sure they have the thief skills to move silently, hide in shadows, and all that. But if not, you would use the surprise metric anyway.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying a DM could just hack that in. I'm asking if
so you determine whether or not they don't know. You have to determine surprise.
Right.
Yeah, D6 1 or 2, in most cases, maybe modified depending on the circumstances.
Oh no, I'm asking about backstab, not like.
Well, that's for backstab to work. That's how backstab works.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that the assassin class doesn't mention backstab at all. I didn't see it. That's what I'm asking.
But you're attacking unawares. That's surprise.
No, but what I'm saying is it doesn't say if they achieve surprise on their attack, they get backstab damage. It doesn't say that. That's what I'm asking.
I would assume they don't get the multiplied backstab damage. They just get the chance to kill.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
That's what I would assume, but I will read the class.
Yeah. Just give it a look just in case, because I probably won't play one, but someone might. So it's just something to keep.
Someone might, yeah. But it's up to the players to know all the ins and outs of the character classes. I want to know the ins and outs of the main rules.
Touche.
I've got enough on my plate.
No, I completely agree. I'm starting to appreciate more that. Yeah, know your character, please, for the love of God. I have a lot more to be worrying about, to be honest, than how your shit works.
I will pick up all those nuances over time, but it's more important for me to know the core mechanics of the game and the scenario. At least initially.
As far as I know, it doesn't say they can, so I'm just going to assume if I play one, they can't. So.
DK, as an FYI, because you like swords and wizardry, Matt Finch is on right now. If you've ever watched Bear the Forever DM, he's hosting Matt Finch.
Yes. Right. I might have to check that out.
We have dragged this stream on until pumpkin time. For those in chat at the moment, we were talking about player agency up until about
an hour ago.
About an hour ago, yeah.
Because we achieved consensus.
Well, the simple fact is, in general, we agreed. So, and that's just it. We had a sensible approach to it, and nobody in the stream really had any disagreement with the comments that were being made, because we don't go on Twitter.
Someone was sensible on the internet. Wow.
Yeah, so we are at pumpkin time, which means it is time for Elfbait and Mages Musings to shill their channel, because DK doesn't have a channel.
Elfbait is the channel. I right now am pretty much streaming alternating Mondays and Sundays, about 10 a.m. Central.
And at the moment, you're talking all about all the sort of things I don't.
Pretty much, yeah. My last few streams have been covering just various games that I like, various odds and ends, and then so
I'll be back on listening to yours once the times have shifted, because remember the hours have changed, and
that's fine.
You've been streaming. You was it Sunday you streamed when I was,
Sundays and Mondays? Yeah.
the
one day that you were on there. Yeah.
I was at my kids' football when you were streaming, so I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. It seems like it's a good time to get a stream on, because it's on a Sunday or a Monday. I tend to get busier later in the day, so it's early enough to catch people far to the east.
The Monday one's a lot easier for me to get on the Sunday, because I work.
It's kind of why I've started alternating, because some people can make the Sunday, some people can make the Monday, and so anyways, but that's me.
Yes, and I'm Mr. Kendaldor of Mage's Musings. So yeah, I post recaps. I recap several games. I'm talking more theory crafting, and as I like to put it, general silliness. If something I find amusing occurs to me, I will probably make a video about it and post it.
And of course, we had the first video back of the new year. Last night, didn't we?
Just posted the new one yesterday. So if you haven't checked it out, by all means, it's live, ready to go. The cliffhanger has been resolved.
Yes, indeed. And of course, you all know me. I'm the old geek, and I just talk nonsense.
And dispels great and grants great wisdom while doing so.
I don't know if there's any great wisdom in what I say.
Oh, stop it!
But I just like to talk about what I like, and it's as simple as that. And I hope that comes across, that I talk about what I like.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for being involved. I mean, I had Saxius on as well earlier. I think he's called off this week's game because of work. It's getting in the way a bit at the moment.
Yeah.
But thank you, everyone in chat. I will be back this Friday for some more Fighting Fantasy. Just as a heads up, a week on Friday, which is the 31st, I won't be streaming because it's a fundraising night at my daughter's football club. So I'll be drinking beer and losing money to a good cause.
Of course.
But yeah, of course. You've got to do that occasionally. Thanks, chat. Thanks for joining in. I'll see you all on Friday, and it's time to say good night.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Yeah, I'll do some more module rankings, Kabuki Kid. I will do some more module rankings. There will be some more videos on that.